29.
28.
27.
26.
25.
24.
23.
22. 21.
20.
19.
18.
17.
16.
15.
14.
13.
12.
11.
10.
8.
6.
6. What happened to 7?
7.
5.
4.
3.
2. 1.
0.
0. So guys, you guys know that we have a guest tonight, and it's Ben Belkin from Jack Wolf Knives. Talked to Ben the first time in Long Beach at Blade Show West, and we really didn't get a lot of time to talk. My phone actually ran out of filming space as we were finishing it up. We just got the very last sentence. I wanted to talk to him more, but we've got him here. I am going to do this as a podcast, so if you happen to be listening to this on Apple Podcasts, just know that there's a link in the description of the podcast to the actual video here on YouTube, or you could go to Rumble and find it. It'll be up on Rumble here in a couple of days. So let's go ahead and bring Ben in for everybody to talk to.
What's up, everyone?
Well, there's like 7 people here, but that's typical, especially on Fridays. I don't know if Bees Blades is still running his live feed, so people start to kind of just straggle in here. But so welcome to my podcast or live feed. And can you see the chat? I don't know how you're doing this. Can you see the chat on the side?
Yeah, I've got the chat in our broadcast studio. I also have YouTube on this monitor, so I can type into it if needed.
Cool. So if you happen to see anything that you want to respond to, just let me know and we'll pull it up on the screen.
10-4.
So first off, let's go ahead and tell us about you.
Tell me about me.
Yep.
All right. Well, my name is Ben Belkin. I was born in the Detroit, Michigan metropolitan area. Farmington Hills is the name of the town. And 1980, I grew up out there. Moved to Arizona in 1999. Went to Arizona State University. Been here ever since. Had about 12 years in the construction and land development business. Built a lot of custom homes, developed subdivisions from raw dirt, through completed infrastructure, stuff like that. Worked on a lot of land projects where you get the legal approvals for a piece of property before you can ever do anything. So I have a lot of experience with that. And around 2013, I started my entrepreneurial pursuits. I kind of wanted to change of pace, so I did some internet stuff with a buddy. We had an internet marketing business. I have 2 sisters. They're younger than me. They're also interested in online businesses, and we had a joint venture with them. I currently still operate some companies with my sisters, online businesses, products businesses. So that experience has been extremely relevant in setting up Jack Wolf Knives. Really all my career experience has been, truthfully. As far as my design background, I've always had an eye for design. In high school, I took technical drafting and CAD classes because I really was drawn to it. I liked the instructor. I liked the nature of the work. I like the precision element of technical drafting. It's just fun. I don't know how to describe it.
I took drafting in high school. 1 semester of it, and it was fun. I don't think it would be something I want to do for a living, but it definitely was fun.
Yeah, I liked it better than right. It's really a technical proficiency, and I certainly liked it better than Shakespeare class or some of the other stuff that I could have taken, that I would have just been sleeping through. So, yeah. So that's where I learned CAD and used it some in my construction career, in drawing site plans, stuff like that for houses, but really haven't used it much in about 15 years. But with the Jack Wolf Knives project, I was able to leverage that skill. I had to dust it off for sure.
Yeah.
But it really allowed me to take what I was seeing inside my mind as far as how I wanted these knives to be and draw them precisely. not
Yeah.
like on paper with a graph paper, but like to the millimeter, to the thousandths of an inch. So
Yeah, that's something
Yeah.
I'm not good at. So I have a friend that is extremely, it's a Fair and Forged Knife Works, Elliot Williamson. And so what I'll do is I'm much better at just making something in the actual material. Like I'll just go and make a knife. And he's like, "Did you draw this?" I'm like, "No, I just made the knife." And he goes, that's a unique skill right there. Like just to look at a piece of metal and kind of draw it on the paper, on the metal, and then once I get close, then just finish it out and have it come out the way I want. And then what I'll do is I'll hand it off to him, and he'll just take all the measurements and just take all the dimensions, and he puts it in CAD for me. And it seems to have worked well, and it doesn't take him very long because I design fixed blades.
Sure. Well,
Oh,
there's
have my
more than one way to. You got a nice donation there, Native Wild Man. Good looking out.
Thanks for the 5 bones there, Native Wild Man.
Very cool. Yeah, I can totally appreciate and respect that. There's really an infinite ways to go about designing something or solving any problem. You know, you can skin more than one ways to skin the cat, as they say. And I think if I had the maker skill and I could produce something complete in the vision of my mind, it'd be super easy to translate it to CAD. I kind of go at it a little bit backwards. I have to draw it in CAD and then gets converted into a 3D model, which is super helpful for visualization, but there has to be a prototype, and that prototype is not going to be perfect. So that prototype has to be examined, carried, used, put in the hands of other people, not just mine. Because I miss things, or doesn't affect me the same way it would affect you, or you don't hold it the same or use it the same or whatever.
Exactly. And that's why I would make a knife and I'd be really nervous about, like, it felt great to me, but like, how are other people going to respond to it? You know, like what's this going to wind up being? So I made a few customs and they went out to people. They got pre-ordered and made for friends and they carried them. I was like, I got people to pay me to beta test stuff.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's great. There's nothing better than real world feedback. It is the most valuable, input you can get on a design. Now, you got to balance that with your vision, design objectives. And it's like, you can't please everyone because then you're pleasing no one kind of thing with your final product. But I firmly believe taking input from people, whether, highly experienced and sometimes inexperienced, is really important too. Hand a knife to someone who doesn't use one a lot and ask them what their impression is. And, like sometimes they tell you something you would have never thought of that actually makes it better.
Yeah, because you get some people that have had knives and dealt with knives and things over the years, and they've just gotten to where they kind of overlook something because it's always been like that. It's like the pocket clips on knives have been so ubiquitous across pocket knives for so many years now. I'm old enough, I'm 47, almost 48. I remember before any knife, the first knife I ever saw that had a pocket clip was like that Gerber, or not the Gerber, I'm sorry, the Spyderco Clip It. And that was, I was already in my teens. I think I was getting ready to ship out for the Navy when I saw one of those for the first time. I was like, that's a ridiculous idea. And now here we are 30 years later, and every knife you buy has got a pocket clip on it. And
right.
That's one of those things that, like, somebody that's not into knives may not overlook that little item that we have just grown accustomed to, and like, oh yeah, it's going to have a pocket clip, whatever.
Absolutely. Yep.
So I have to ask you, I mean, in Detroit, like, I'm trying to think of where you're at. I've been up there in that area before. I'm trying to think if you're out in the outskirts where there is still a lot of hunting and fishing and stuff, but how did you get into knives?
Right. So that's a great question. So my background with knives wasn't the hunting and fishing type background, like the real outdoor use. Mine was more pocket knives, sort of everyday carry before people were talking about that. And that's simply because I got my love from knives from my grandfather. That's who I named the company after. His name was Jack Wolf Belkin. So my grandfather, who was like, I really looked up to him, he was a builder in the Detroit area. And so was his father. And so, he always had a pocket knife, because he's always on the job site. So whatever kind of little thing you got to do with your pocket knife, that's what you do, whether you've been picking the dirt out of your fingernails or whatever. Right. And
Splinters.
he always carried it. Right. Like, I mean, there's a million things you're going to pull your pocket knife out for if that's your profession. And so he carried slip joints because, well, gosh, I think all our grandfathers did.
Yeah.
And when Swiss Army knives kind of started surfacing up with some regularity, he really liked those because of all the neat little tools. I mean, it just totally appealed to him. So
The first multi-tool.
Totally.
It was truly the first
carry,
multi-tool.
Really was. And you could carry it in your pocket, you know, and you had, you know, they had a bunch of different models or whatever. So yeah, he loved that. And so when I was a little kid, they lived like maybe 2.5 miles away. So we'd go over there for dinner or just to hang out. And, you know, every day he'd come home from work, he had in his closet, he had like a crystal like tray. It was probably like my grandma's serving dish, you know? And that's where he pocket dumped when he came home from work.
Yeah.
You know, his ring, his wallet, his pocket knife, all that stuff, his keys. And as a kid, I love that tray. You know, that tray was like
my dad had the same thing. My dad had the same thing. It was just a little, I think my dad's was an old, cigar box, like an old school wooden cigar box that he would just at the end of the day because he was a mechanic, he'd come home and he'd toss his pocket knives and any little tools and stuff that he maybe accidentally left in his pocket. Those all go in there and they'd go back in his pocket the next morning. And I remember being a kid and that was my favorite thing, was to just go in his bedroom and dig in the little box of stuff that he had brought home from work and tossed in the bowl.
Exactly. Yep. And so the thing that I was always the most attracted to in that tray was those Swiss Army knives, those pocket knives, you know? And so I loved them. I was just like, you know, I don't know how to describe it. Like, you know, you fall in love. And I would like, you know, put it in my pocket, walk around his place, you know, forget I had it, or maybe did forget I had it, take it home. And then he'd have to call my mom and dad and be like, is my pocket knife with Ben again? And so they'd have to like confiscate it from me and take it back, you know? And then when I got old enough, which was probably younger than was appropriate, like when I think back on it, that's what my folks or my grandparents would give me as like a gift or a souvenir if they traveled. And so I started to develop this little Swiss Army knife or pocket knife collection. They weren't all Swiss Army knives. I had like little buck knives and stuff too, but they're all pocket knives. So to answer your question, I really came up with pocket knives. And then of course, as I got older, and this is now like the early 90s and stuff, you know, me and my buddy would go to like a flea market and I would just be in awe at all the cheap, cool stuff at the flea market. Yeah, there you go.
You
know, like
the crappy frost cutlery.
Right. And I had like ninja stars and like blowguns and cobra knives from the.
Bro, I still got all that shit. Like I have ninja stars in a box over here. I got a blowgun in the corner over near the grandfather clock. I've got a target set up for it in the yard.
That's what I'm talking about. Like,
Yeah,
dude, that blowgun was taller than me, you know?
Yeah.
I would just shoot it. I'd take my sister's stuffed animal, put it at the end of the hall, like shoot across the hallway into her stuffed animals, like those big darts. So funny.
So, not related to knives, I got in trouble with the HOA at our last house because I had that blowgun and I love squirrel meat and we had squirrels everywhere there. And so I set up a target and I started getting to where I could hit that target from in the kitchen, from this little chair in the kitchen, out the sliding door into the yard, across the back. We had this tiny little yard at the place we were at before. And I started getting to where I was accurate and I could hit pretty much the same spot every time. And then I started putting a little cracked corn thing there and the squirrels would come up. My wife would come home and she's like, what are you doing? I was like, skinning squirrels. And she goes, what? And I was like, oh, I'm having squirrel. And I would I'd clean them. I'd soak them in the salt water and I basically hunted squirrels and we got in trouble with the HOA.
That is hilarious, man. Those things are like extremely accurate, man. Those blowguns are really, really fun to play with.
Really accurate, especially like I wasn't real far away. I was maybe like 25 feet away.
Yeah, you know, within 30 feet, you can definitely shoot what you're aiming at once you get good with it.
I was using the impact ones, like the hard plastic nose, and I'd put a screw in the end of it, so it was a little heavier and harder.
Nice,
no problem. I always had a freezer full of squirrel.
I bet. Well, that's awesome.
So you already answered my question about first knife. And you told me about Jack Wolf Knives. I was going to ask you where the name come from. That was actually one of my questions. That's actually really cool. I think I told you this when we were at, when we looked at the knife that I had made when we were at Blade Show West. I actually used my father's, the first knife I ever got. My father engraved my initials on it in his handwriting. And I used that because my father passed away here, almost 7 years ago. And I used that as my logo so that I made sure that my father was associated with all the knives I ever made, because it was just something that seemed to make sense to me. And, you know, sometimes some of these fixed blade knives, they're going to last somebody a lifetime. So my father just kind of gets to live on through that. And the second you said that, I was like, that's actually cool. You hear that from a lot of like knife makers and knife designers, that they pay some respects back to the person that gave them some knives or got them into the knife hobby and stuff like that.
Well, exactly. That's exactly right. And, you know, that sentiment was extremely important to me. And I also recognize that sentiment is extremely important to a lot of us in the community. And so I wasn't about to name the company after myself. I'm just like, I wasn't comfortable doing that. You know, I generally don't even like to draw attention to myself, but if I'm going to do this kind of project, I feel like I don't have much choice.
Kind of have to.
You know, it is what it is. But at the same time, I really wanted to honor my grandfather because that's where it all came from. And it's a really relatable story. And it's a way for him to live on and be honored. And yeah, it just sounded cool. Like once I kind of said it and it rolled off my tongue, I was like, yeah, that's got to be what this is. It's a cool, I'm not gonna lie, that's a cool name. That, like Jack Wolf Knives, you're like, I'm interested now. You've got my attention. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. And you know, these types of knives, slip joint knives, are jackknives. That's a old-fashioned term for a knife with a pivot in it, you know, so it just kind of works. And then calling the different model names, you know, this Jack, that Jack, it all just kind of came together in like a brand identity. And I really wanted to have a strong brand identity. So yeah, that's where it came from. Well,
since we're doing this, I actually, because I knew you were coming, I have my grandfather's old Rimfire Classic 22 dogleg trapper, done by Camillus in New York. This is an old one. It's when they were still in New York, and I love it. Old, and it still has not lost anything, but it's got some patina and some age to it.
Oh, and it, as it should, right? You know, that's those are amazing. You know, there's heritage there, there's history there, there's a once great American cutlery industry there. There's hundreds of years of design and perfection and artistry, and you know, there's a lot more to that knife than just the knife itself. If you're into the emotional side of the hobby and not just the, like, I have a tool side of the hobby, you know?
Well, and I mentioned a video. This one's kind of special because my father did not really have, like, my grandfather on my father's side. I mean, I loved him. He was my grandfather, but he was not, like, my dad really didn't get a lot from him. Like, my dad was like, I never had much of an example as a father. He was a long haul truck driver. He really didn't know how to associate with the family. He was alcoholic. And so my dad actually became more attached to his father-in-law than he ever was to his actual father. And this was a gift from my father to his father-in-law, just as a truly heartfelt gift at Christmas. He got this for him. And when it came to me, I was like, that's actually really cool. It's something my father gave to my grandfather that now is mine. Because when my grandfather passed away, this went to my father, and then my mother brought it to me after my father passed away.
Yeah, it's a great story. I mean, those are the types of like memories that I want people to experience when they buy a knife from me, when they buy a slip joint knife that reminds them of their father or their grandfather or their father-in-law or whatever their individual story is, you know? Like, I'm sorry, but you're not going to invoke the same emotion with the latest, greatest liner lock knife necessarily, you know, because the history is just not there yet. The same way it is for the knives that existed in the early 1900s. I'm not saying they're devoid of that type of association, but it's just doesn't have the same, you know, duration that we have with the slip joints.
Yeah, the longevity is not there. I mean, like I said, I remember I was in my teens when I saw the first knife I ever saw that had a pocket clip, and I was probably in my mid-20s before I ever got one that I owned, and it was a Gerber Easy Out. That was the first knife I ever had that had a pocket clip. and it was issued to me. I had other Gerbers that were issued to me when I was in the military, but the first knife I ever had that was pocket clip was a little Gerber Easy Out with the air light. It was like a light frame or something. It was really thin. It had a pocket. It was a horrible knife. And that was the first knife I ever had that had a pocket clip. And if I remember correctly, I took it off because I just didn't want it on there.
Right.
So, but now here we are, like I said, 30 years later, and I don't have a lot of knives that don't have pocket clips.
Correct. The utility has proven to be substantial. And, you know, there's no arguing the utility and sort of efficiency of a one-handed opening knife. You know, I'll never act like a slip joint is the end all be all. But I think slip joint knives that take two hands to open, knives that don't have a pocket clip, still have a place in a man's collection and rotation. You know, they've got some real strong things to offer. Like, you know, they're light, they're thin, a single blade anyway. They're appropriate in just about any place you could pull it out, church, post office. You know, no one's going to sneeze at that knife you pulled out there. They're going to see it as a piece of almost, what's the word I'm looking for? A tool and not a weapon, right?
Yeah.
A utility tool and not a weapon. Obviously, they're legal to carry just about anywhere.
That's going to be a question I ask you here in a little bit.
Yeah, they're legal to carry just about anywhere. And they usually have extremely excellent cutting geometry because many of the modern knives are designed around durability and overall utility, which is going to be without question at a sacrifice of slicing performance.
The blade stock sometimes blade stock on a slip joint's half of that what it is on an average folder these days.
Exactly. So I think slip joints are cool. You know, I really dig them, and that's why I really wanted to make my project about that. It's what I know. It's what I collect. I think they still exist in a very what's the word I'm looking for? Passionate niche within the community. But I think that there needs to be a bridge between the slip joint community and the modern knife enthusiast community, and that's where I'm trying to slot my project in to try to appeal to both crowds and say, hey guys, like, come check this out. I got a slip joint I think you guys are really going to dig. You know, maybe none of you will go ahead.
I was going to say, I think I remember we were talking about that at the table because, like I said, I dig some of the artistry. Like if you guys look at the jigged bones, sometimes they've got like different patterns and stuff. There's some artistry that really like you expect in a slip joint that a lot of times you don't see in your average folding knife that's like a flipper or something like that. Like sometimes, yeah, there's some artistry to them, but only when you're getting up into premiums. A lot of times, even some of your cheap, like low budget, like really budget slip joints have got a lot of like little flourishes that they do on it with the scale material in between. Even if they do it in plastic, they've still stayed true to that little bit of artistry that was in the old original slip joints.
Right. I think they have a warmth, you know, that modern knives don't have. Like I don't know if that's the right word, but that's just sort of the way my brain paints a picture. Like am I a shadow band? I don't know. Is that guy shadow band?
It's Polly, this is an actual podcast. I'm not answering a lot of questions here. That's my buddy Polly. He has a channel, Purple Heart Barbecue. I didn't mean to bring it up. I was trying to respond to it and I forgot. But this is just actual podcast as opposed to like a regular live feed where I bring Polly's things up and talk to Polly. But he's a maniac and can't be trusted to have anything worthwhile to talk about.
Okay, good. Noted. Good to know. So yeah, no, I hope people like my offerings. You know, I really want them to appeal to both crowds. I want to see modern knife guys who look at a traditional slip joint knife and think it's just a bridge too far for their taste. Be curious enough to try something in the dress that they're used to. The super steel, the titanium, the fat carbon fiber, the canvas micarta, stuff like that.
It's one of my favorites. I love micarta.
Me too. It's an amazing material. It's durable. It doesn't shrink or swell like a natural material. You can keep it rough or you can polish it till it looks like it's dripping wet with oil. You know, it's an insulator. You can get it dirty and then you can clean it again, and you can use whatever fabric under the sun, you know, to make it.
Yeah.
It's just cool.
I've only ever made 2 knives with wood handles. Everything else has either been G10 or micarta. And of those 3 materials, I definitely would rather work with micarta than G10 or wood. Wood is just hard. You never know what you're going to get. Sometimes there's problems with it. It swells, or you get some cracks, and sometimes you can't get the finish you want on it. And G10, it stinks. Like when you're grinding G10, it gets in your beard, it gets in your hair, it gets in your skin. And no matter how much you've washed up, like you get, like, you think you've got yourself good and clean, you come home and you take a shower, and it's like being around a campfire for like 8-10 hours. And you're like, why does my beard smell like that? And it's just the smell soaks in. It's not pleasant. I would much rather work with micarta. Plus, it just looks so much better. Like I said, especially like you said, you can do it smooth, or you can do it coarse, or you can do it to a point where it's kind of coarse and then bead blast it. And then you get a completely different finish where it's still grippy, but it has this unique look to it. It's not as coarse as if you just took it off the grinder. It's great stuff. I see why Westinghouse used it for so many things as insulators. And it's just easy to work with.
Exactly. It's, all this stuff kind of goes in and out of style. And I'm really glad right now that it's in style and fashionable, because I dig it. And for its practical reasons and its aesthetic reasons, it kind of wins all the way around. Now, I do like natural materials. I like slip joints with bone and wood. But from the modern interpretation standpoint, I didn't start there, obviously, because I'm looking for more modern materials. But also for the reasons you mentioned, I'm super gun shy with natural materials. Being in Arizona here, I've witnessed things shrink, twist, and warp that I never thought would shrink, twist, and warp, and to degrees that were shocking. Even just today, my buddy and I share a space, like a workspace, and he's a custom knife maker. He forges and makes fixed blades. And when we were in Texas at Blade Show, Texas, he bought handle material from one of the vendors in Texas where it's humid. And then bought like some of the stuff from my table. I got a buddy who lives there. Like, he had the boxes at his house, and it took him a couple weeks to ship the boxes back. So they sat in the humid environment. So they were there for close to a month. He gets these blocks of wood. They cupped up like dramatically, and they were dense hardwoods. They weren't like American woods. They were like South American hardwoods.
Yeah, it'll happen.
I looked at that. Yeah, and I looked at that. I was like, there's another reason I'm not super stoked on using wood, because these knives are coming from a place there that's humid near the ocean, and then they're going to get on a plane and come to Arizona, and they're going to sit for a little bit while I quality check everything and get ready for distribution, and then they're going to get moisture sucked out of them. Then they're going to get on a plane and go to a distributor, and it's like, who the hell knows what's going to happen to that wood in that whole process?
I haven't had any problems with warpage on the wood that I did use, because the only stuff I've used is stabilized wood. I got it from Rob's Wildwood. Rob's stuff typically doesn't have too much with it, because he does a really good job with his stabilization, and you can get a really high finish on them. But like, it takes so much longer. I literally, the last one I made in a redwood burl, and I literally was using micro mesh to hand polish it at like 10,000 grit to get the finish I wanted on it. It probably took me 8-10 hours to get just the handle finish I wanted when I made that knife. And I said that's probably the last one I'm ever going to make like that, because it's just like, with that, you don't have to worry so much about it, but like, to get the finish you want, it's a lot harder than it is on some of the synthetics.
Right. And that's not practical from a production standpoint per se.
Exactly.
When you have material that's that unfriendly to work with. So that's why I like the micarta. It's a real nice balance. That's why I like the carbon fiber, because they can be super precise when they mill it and sand it and everything.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm starting. I'm not saying I'll never branch out and do something different like that, but I think from a risk standpoint, this is where it made sense to start.
I would love to see one in like a polished hardwood with the grain, just like, because when they do those stabilized woods, that grain takes on that resin, and when you polish it like that, it almost looks metallic. It almost looks like there's glitter inside the wood. You're like, it's just gorgeous for like about 3 days till you rub that around in your pocket for a while, then it's gone.
Right.
So we talked about target market because I know you said you wanted to bridge that gap, and I think that would be awesome to be able to bridge that gap to where guys are looking at slip joints again, because I do like slip joints. They're awesome. Like I said, the artistry that's in them. But the UK market, is that something you're trying to get these marketed overseas sometimes? Because I don't know if a lot of the guys that follow me know this. You can't carry a locking knife in Europe. Like if it's got a lock at all, doesn't matter if it's a lock back, button lock, it doesn't matter. If it locks, you can't have it.
Correct. So first of all, they're faced with differences in laws from country to country, even sometimes city to city. They have rules restricting what they can own and rules further restricting what they can carry. But pretty much the safest thing you can sell somebody is a non-locking, two-handed opening knife with a blade with a cutting edge under 3 inches. You pretty much can carry that anywhere you can carry a knife.
Yep.
And so to answer your question, absolutely. And in fact, I already have European distribution in place. I have UK distribution because UK, specifically after Brexit, now has to buy goods from within the United Kingdom, or else they're subject to importation taxes and importation taxes. They're all going to pay VAT taxes, which is like their sales tax over there. Yeah. But if you're in the UK, it's a lot better to buy from a UK dealer because otherwise it's got to go through customs. You can get caught up there and yada, yada. So UK dealer, I already have one. They're called Framar knives, Framar knives. They're known as being the longest standing Chris Reeve dealer that's been working with Chris Reeve. It's a father who started the business in the 70s. And now the son, Andrew, who's my age, he works with his dad and is essentially poised to take over that business. Super nice guys, man. I'm talking like salt of the earth dudes. So I sent a box over there and my knives went on sale today. He sold them out. He sold them out in less than a day.
Nice.
So clearly like the UK is interested and I'm humbled by that. And then as far as Europe, go ahead.
I don't know if you know this. Rick Hinder makes slip joints now. He makes slippies. And I have a friend that lives in England and he tells me every time, he was one of my subscribers. Now we're friends. We talk on Instagram and he tells me every time, he's like, are you going to a knife show? And I said, yeah, I might be going to this show. I might be going to that show. And he's like, if you go, see if Rick Hinder has any of those slippies, because I can have those. Like you could send that to me and it wouldn't raise any flags. And every time I go, I tell Rick the same thing. And I was like, have you got any of those? And he goes, no, there's a guy came by. He bought all 6 of them I had because he's sending them to England. And I was like, same thing. Like they're great slip joints and they're more of a modern pattern. They're like a modern design slip joint. They look like a typical flipper. They look like his regular knives. They're just done in a slip joint fashion. And they're great. And it's one of those things like just the guys in England, if they know somebody that's going to a knife show, well, that's one of the first things they'll ask you, like, hey, can you get me one? And I have not been able to get one yet.
Yeah, it was important for me to get knives over there. And it's not because I just want to sell a bunch of knives. It's because I want this brand to I want to serve people. I want to make these knives available to people who are going to use them and enjoy them. And I want to serve these markets that are underserved. It costs more money to ship knives over there. It's a pain in the absolute butt to get the knives over there. Like just the last 2 weeks alone, I probably had 15 hours of extra work dealing with the international shipping. Like I don't have to do that. I want to do that, Yeah. and so I hope it works out great over there because, I want to build a brand that has an international footprint. I want to build a legacy company, not just do it for a few years or as a hobby thing. So that's a big part of my strategy is to have a good, robust customer base in Europe.
Yeah. So I have to ask, what is your favorite non-slip joint knife?
That's a tough question. I do own modern folding knives. I don't carry them as often. One thing that limits me to a degree is that I'm left-handed. So I don't typically buy right-handed locking knives. I've always opened slip joints with my right hand. I don't look at a slip joint as being right-handed or left-handed. I actually get lefties that get mad at me because I don't put nail nicks on the other side. I'm like, guys, I'm a lefty, and sorry, like, just learn to open it with your right hand. Like, every slip joint in your entire life has been that way. It's not a safety issue. Like, come on, give me a break. Like, there's gonna be like 8 of you who buy them, and then I'm gonna be sitting on 200 of them. So,
well, I was going to say, I said that in a video not too long. I was talking about something, and it went to modern politics with like the less than 1% of the people that are the loudest and are getting all the accommodation. I was like, 20% of the population, between 10 and 20% of the population is left-handed. Go buy a left-handed pencil sharpener, or a left-handed pair of scissors like we had when I was growing up, or a left-handed chainsaw. No, you just have to use it right-handed. I'm like, why did like these companies like, oh, well, we'll make left-handed ones. And I'm like, you guys that's dumb. Like, you are going to, you think that's going to work, but you're not going to sell as many of them as you think you're going to.
Right. And now, I think we're around 11%. That's not a lot. So when you talk about 11% of the people and what percent of those 11% buy this product, it's like, this is a small market. Now, so I don't begrudge people that don't make left-handed locking knives. I just prefer to operate a left-handed locking knife if one exists, because it's designed ergonomically for me, and you're dealing with a blade. So just for safety's sake, it's nice to not open it funny. And, Chris Reeve is one brand that has made left-handed locking knives. And so I've always really been drawn to those, not only for that reason, of course, but I really like his design aesthetics. Like, I think his lines are beautiful, and his execution, whether you like his action or not, is one thing, but his manufacturing precision is freaking excellent, you know? And so those are the type of things that appeal to me. I'm not like the sit and flick a knife open and close type dude. I don't have any problem with that. I mean, it's cool, but I'm more of like a slow roll kind of guy. And so those Chris Reeves really like fit my bill.
It's one of my favorite knives. The Sebenza is one of my favorite knives ever.
I love the Sebenza, and I'm more of a 21 guy than a 31 guy. I like the 21 because the way how they constructed it, where you can just sandwich the whole unit together to make it tight, and then it works the way it's supposed to, versus an adjustable pivot.
I won't ever. So I had an old school Sebenza 21 that was in the old BG62 steel. It was like the classics, but I bought it when it was still, and I'd had it for years, and I sold it. And within a week, I was like, I bought a new Sebenza 21 to replace it. And I was like, man, I was just at that point, I was like, I can't ever not have my Sebenza in my collection. Like, I really had, the guy paid me more than that knife than he should have for as the kind of shape that knife was in. And the second I went back to my case and I started looking at stuff, I was like, yeah, I got to buy another Sebenza.
Yeah, I feel empty when I don't have one. And, I used to carry the big around, and then I got a small, and I like smaller knives. And once I got that small, I was like, I really like this knife. I really like this knife a lot. So, but again, I'm, on a percentage basis, 85% of the time I carry a slip joint, probably, maybe more. So I have a little collection of locking knives, but you don't get a lot of time. So my favorite, to answer your question, is probably the small Sebenza.
That's a solid choice. Like I said, I have one in for sharpening right now. A guy took a big chip out of, and he's like, please tell me you can fix that. And I was like, oh, I can fix it. It's going to cost you a little bit.
Right. Take some time, my friend. Time costs money.
It really doesn't. I mean, it's in Damascus, so it's going to be fairly soft, and I'll probably have that knife resharpened in like 30 minutes. Nice. I do it professionally. I do everything on stones by hand because, you don't want to overheat a blade going on a grinder. You don't take off too much material. So I just do it all freehand on stones. But okay, what's your favorite? I know that Jared felt bad because he didn't know what you were talking about patterns. But like I said, growing up with slip joints, I know what you mean when you talk pattern. What's your favorite pattern for a slip joint?
That's a great question too. Before I answer that, there's a question in the chat. I want to answer that real quick.
Which one?
Potato R33 said, love the Jack Wolf knives, but how would you suggest I go about picking one up when they're out of stock everywhere? Well, in fact, they are not out of stock everywhere. Now, the fat carbon variant, there was 4 colors: black micarta, green micarta, natural, which is like brown micarta, and then fat carbon fiber. The fat carbon fiber sold out in under an hour, every single unit across every single dealer. I was like blown away. But still, my card is left. And a bunch of the dealers are completely sold out, but some of them are not. And I'll rattle those off. Shop my small guys, if you guys don't mind. The mom and pop shops. I'm really trying to promote mom and pop shops. I mean, we all love the big stores, but of course the big stores all sold out first. So if you could support the mom and pop shops, I really appreciate it. I know they will too. OCD for EDC. His name's Justin Job and Molly Job. They're a dealer. They also have a YouTube channel. Go to the authorized dealer link up there underneath the logo.
That's why I brought it up.
Yeah, perfect. So OCD for EDC, Blade Capone. Who am I forgetting? White Mountain Knives. They all have some left. And actually, I haven't checked in a few hours, but Smoky Mountain Knife Works had a few left too. So
Nice.
there should still be some to get. I think throughout the weekend. I simply have no idea how well they're going to continue to sell. About 75% of them are already sold. So I was super stoked about that.
Everybody here should know OCD for EDC. Justin, I talk with Justin pretty regular. He's got a great channel. I need to get him on here for a live feed. We've talked about it, just hasn't worked out. So,
and if
Justin
you shop from Justin, if you shop from him, he made a really cool like freebie to go with your order. So in case you guys haven't seen it, inside the Jack Wolf knife packaging, there's a POG. POGs are these cardboard coins with decorative artwork on them. They were kind of a collector's item in the 90s. So sort of a nostalgic throwback for us to sort of enjoy, the good years of old. Now,
I missed out on the whole POGs thing. I joined the Navy in 1990.
You're too old for POGs.
Oh no, I remember seeing them. But
I'm saying you didn't play with them.
No. I joined the Navy when I was 17 and I wound up going to Japan and was there for 13 years.
Now, what Justin did and Molly is they ordered slap bracelets. If you remember what those are.
I do. My sister used to have them.
Exactly. So they got slap bracelets made with Jack Wolf logos and OCD for EDC logos on them. And so you'll get a free slap bracelet with your purchase. And what's that good for? I'll tell you what it's good for. You get it, you talk to your kids, you explain to them what slap bracelets for, you show them these like really interesting trends that happened 20 years ago. I mean, if you look around right now, everybody's wearing 90s clothes. I mean, I can't tell you how many Nirvana shirts I've seen in the last 90 days.
Bro, my kid is 15. She's 14. She turns 15 in just a few weeks. And like, I see the clothes. She came back from shopping with her wife, and I was like, "Where did you go? Like, did you go to Goodwill and buy that?" She goes, "No, it's brand new." I was like, "No, that was brand new when I was like 19. Like, that's what chicks were wearing when I was a 19-year-old, and I would come back to the States on leave. That's where you got that. You got that at Goodwill. Don't lie to me." So,
dude, what's old is new, my friend, and we're always old.
We are. So back to the what's your favorite slip joint pattern before we forget?
So my favorite slip joint pattern, probably the boy's knife, probably the classic boy's knife. It's 3.5 inches closed sleeve board pattern. So, wider in the back than it is at the pivot. Really basic slip joint, and as far as a single blade, clip point blade, spear point blade, sheep's foot blade. I don't know if I have a favorite blade shape. Just depends on what mood I'm in. But that small, lightweight, do almost everything first knife you'd give your son is probably my favorite. And as far as being a grown man carrying it, I mean, I pretty much work at a computer most of the day. I'm not out doing anything rough with my knife. So it does almost everything I need it to do. And it can fit nicely in the fifth pocket of your jeans if it's, the right pair of pants. And so that could be a great secondary if you're not using it as a primary as well.
I always like the like that 1929 Barlow, the short but broad blade that swept up really far. I always liked that Barlow blade, that Barlow style. That was always my favorite, like that. And then I don't know if you've seen it. Finch Knives does a 1929 Barlow flipper.
I have it. I bought it when I saw it.
Did you?
And that's
great.
One of those. I love it. And that was like one of those right-handed knives. I was like, I need to own that because that's got the style. Like the style is just right on that thing. I love it. Yeah.
Well, that's one of those things that like I was telling somebody the other day. I think it might have been actually it was Justin over at Fiberlight Fire Starters. You met him up there. He really liked you. They talk
Oh,
him
that
and
guy's
Dave, yeah,
that
David
guy's
Horseman.
great, man.
Yeah. So I was talking to him about it, and I was telling him, I was like, bro, like you like the Jack Wolf knives. Look at that. Like he was asking us like, what would be a good knife like for like a gift for like a groomsman? And I was like if you're not wanting to spend a lot of money, you want something that's like classic and traditional. I mentioned, yeah, I was like, Jack Wolf knives. I was like, but I know that their stuff's hard to get a hold of. I was like, go look at like the Finch the 1929 Barlow or the Holiday with the Warncliffe blade. I was like, they look so much like the traditional slip joints, but they're more modern. They got a pocket clip. The action on's great, and they're flippers. And he goes, what? And we got to look. He was, oh yeah, I really like that. He was talking about the 1929 that Barlow. They are a great knife. I don't own one, but I've had a couple in just for use on the channel because I do 2 videos a day. I get so much stuff in. I can't buy everything I would need for the channel. My wife would murder me.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think that was a great recommendation. I think that recommendation was perfect.
Yeah. Because they like you're trying to bridge that gap. They kind of are too. You guys are going about it in like opposite sides of the spectrum. You're still going to bridge that gap, but you're doing it on opposite sides of it. And I was like, yeah, that's actually pretty cool.
Yeah, there's absolutely some design, consistency, or like, I guess what I'm saying is the design language, the thought process, the artistic part of it is going to be, there's going to be similarities between what I'm doing and what Finch is doing for sure. Yeah. But of course, the difference being they're making locking knives, they're making slip joint knives.
Yeah. So I have
someone asked, sorry, real quick. Someone asked, he said, same commenter. He presumes the laid back jack hasn't been released then yet. That is correct. Today was the first release of the first model. And my plan is to do a release every month. And we're going to change the model up every month. So nice. Sort of rolling through the catalog on a monthly basis. And I'm not publishing the order in which they're coming out. I want to have some suspense there. That's part of the fun. But I will give everybody about a 3-week heads up before the actual sales date, so you have time to decide whether or not you want to buy that one, sock some money aside for a few weeks or whatever it is.
Yeah. No, I got to see the ones that you had at Blade Show West, and I really liked the packaging. I'll ask you about the packaging later, but I have an honest question because we just recently, you see that I have this back here. We just recently did an episode of my live feed where there may have been a little bit too much of the barley pop or some of a little bit of that grain juice that I consumed. And I told somebody that because we were watching Cutlery Corner Network, and I said, if you purchase, like if you guys donate the money for these mystery knives, I'll buy them. But when you watch Cutlery Corner Network, I have an honest question about this. Do you think that some of the really cheap, like Hen and Rooster and Steel Bull and some of those crap, I mean, Hen and Rooster's not the worst knives out there, but there are a lot of those slip joints that are just really horrible that are out there. And that's where they usually wind up as like Cutlery Corner Network. Do you think those kind of have ruined some of the reputation of slip joint knives, those like $5 knives that come out and they're like just shitty?
Yes, I do. I think that when you compare them to the quality that used to be produced in the earlier part of the 20th century or the early 1900s, the early part of the 20th century, it's a shame how far that regressed. And manufacturers are capable of so much more. Now, I don't begrudge an inexpensive knife. I think that even someone who doesn't have a lot of money needs to be able to afford something that'll get a job done. I don't buy those knives. I don't know how well they actually cut. I don't know how well they keep an edge. Like if they're such garbage that they fall apart or the steel is like pot metal, then I don't have any love for a product like that. But if it'll do the job for someone, then I can appreciate it. However, I think to answer your question, it absolutely has diluted people's perceptions of what a slip joint is.
Well, I can tell you, I had a Hen and Rooster a long time ago. I got it at some little store at the shopping mall, and it was not a bad knife. I still own it somewhere. It's a little Hen and Rooster doctor's knife. It's got the long blade, the short blade, and the one
Spatula.
Spatula. So it's got the short blade, the spatula. That's what it's got, like the pill crusher and the spatula. And it was not a bad knife at all. But I've seen some of the newer Hen and Roosters and stuff like that. And you may as well try and use a soda can. Like it won't hold an edge. You can tell it's shitty steel because when you're sharpening it, you can see the chrome coating, the chrome plating coming off. You're like, oh, that's got to be a good knife right there. Yeah, it's sad though that's like what people think of when they think of a slip joint. Are those like the shitty Imperial cutleries and Hen and Rooster and steel bowls and stuff like that?
I agree. Now I think because of the cutlery industry in Pennsylvania, because of specifically Bill Howard, the owner and operator of Great Eastern Cutlery, that the perception of a quality slip joint has really changed for people tuned into it, because that man's been making some of the finest cutlery that's ever been produced in America, slip joint cutlery that's ever been produced in America now since 2006, I think is
something
when they
like
started.
that. I just had to line out that question because I had Great Eastern. I had a question about Great Eastern. So you just basically answered the question I was going to ask you later. Great Eastern Cutlery makes great stuff. There's some of the best. Just overall, some of the best knives. Period. Not even if you just look at them as slip joints, they are some of the best made American knives. Period. They are amazing.
I totally agree. And you can't, I don't know who you even compare them to. Like you compare them to other slip joint makers, there is no comparison.
I was gonna say, there's not much.
There's nothing. And if you want to compare, nothing that compares. I don't want to over exaggerate. There's other companies that are making some pretty nice American made slip joints, but not at Bill Howard's level. They're just not at Bill Howard's level. And as far as comparing him to modern knife makers, but it's like, it's an apple and it's not even an apple and an orange. It's like an apple and a steak. You know what I mean?
Used to say, that's what I say. I tell these guys all the time. It's like, you're not even comparing apples and oranges. You're comparing apples and watermelons. They're not even the same species.
Totally. So I think that fortunately we have Bill Howard and Great Eastern Cutlery to be able to demonstrate how a slip joint knife in the traditional manner should be manufactured. And, it's a frustrating corner of the knife hobby now because there's not enough of them to go around and they're essentially impossible to score on drops. But on the other hand, if you really understand like what's happening there, and so for example,
we can answer this one. I just didn't want that one to pass by. I wanted to make sure you threw that one up.
Sure. I've been to Great Eastern Cutlery before. I'm going again in June. They do an annual customer appreciation event they call the Rendezvous. Mm-hmm. And so you can get an appreciation for how they run their business. And this is in a very small town in Western Pennsylvania on the Allegheny River. They have old building with even older machines, and a lot of it is skilled hand labor. And that's been sort of traded down through the town over time. And it's like, they have a certain capacity to make knives in there, and that's what they can do. And they're working.
Where are they at in Pennsylvania? Because I'm originally from Southeast Ohio. I used to drive to Pittsburgh every Saturday to go to Primanti Brothers.
North of Pittsburgh, a couple hours, in a town called Titusville.
I know where Titusville is. I know exactly where it is. Like I'm literally just like I'm across the river from Wheeling. So if I go across instead of going to Pittsburgh and I go straight across, I'd be at Titusville in like probably 45 minutes from my house. Maybe an hour.
So you're familiar with the area. It's
small. It's nothing. It's a small area.
Right. So it's not the kind of thing where they can just let's expand production and add shifts. It's like, how? Those machines are 150 years old, And it's like there's nobody around. Right. And it's like once these things break, like we're going the other direction. We can't just like build more square footage and add CNC machines in here. So, and the dude is not about pumping out money. He's about quality, about making the best knife he can make. And he's not interested in really anything else. So it's like, yes, it's annoying that not everybody can get one, but just be glad we can get any of them, because without that particular place, those particular people, those particular machines, like that's authentic Americana. You cannot reproduce it. And so if it goes away, it ain't coming back to the same degree ever again.
Well, and that's I guarantee that is the only place that you're going to find those machines, and it's probably the only place you're going to find anyone that knows how to work on them. So it's not like they can just like, oh, we'll just get more. There aren't any more, and it's not like you're going to be able to find somebody to service those machines, so they can't move. It's like one of those cottage industries, like
that's right.
Like they used to have in Germany, Germany, when they used to actually make decent knives over in Solingen. That was a cottage industry. One guy was making this, one guy was making this, and everybody bring everything, and it would get assembled together. Like you're making it in your little shop, and this guy's making his part in his little shop, and this guy's making the bolsters over here, and it all comes together and gets put together, and it winds up being the entire town that winds up having a hand in everything that got made.
Right. Right. It was a town effort, but now he's the only one left. But it was a cottage industry town for certain. Now he's really the only one left. The other factories have closed. The machines have been salvaged or sold off. And so it's even that much harder for him to do that effectively because there is no support from other industry within the town. Like he hires from within the town, and not everybody's willing to work that hard. Not everybody has the skill to do that job.
It's not easy.
And so, hell no.
Making knives is not easy as a knife maker. People are like, oh, well, it's not that hard. You just go out. Like, why don't you can't just make a knife? And I'm like, bro, like literally one knife to make a custom knife sometimes takes 60, 70, 80 hours, not counting like heat treat and other small little things. And then the cost that's involved in that. People just don't, they think it's just like, oh, just make a knife. Fucking go make a Ferrari. They're hard to make. Knives are hard to make. That's why a lot of these brands in today's age with the internet and like the demand can surge so much when people catch on to how cool this stuff is, why these brands can't keep up. It's not because they're trying to like limit demand or limit supply. It's because they can't. Yeah. It's like we have a hard enough time keeping these jobs filled as it is because this is hard work and it's difficult and it's demanding and not everybody's up for it, So maybe I should send him an email and see if he needs somebody that knows how to make knives. Like, hey, I am sick of California, I'll tell you.
Oh, dude, I bet man, I got to tell you, like that place is beautiful. If you wanted to change a pace from California, that would be a good choice.
Bro, like I said, I'm from there. I'm from the foothills of the Allegheny Mountains. I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm from Southeast Ohio.
Beautiful.
It's beautiful out there. I would love to go back, but one of the people ask me, why don't you just go, just leave? My daughter is a competitive figure skater. She's on the U.S. figure skating team. And so she's here. This is where her coaches are. This is where the Olympic Training Center is. And people are like, just go. It's just figure skating. I'm like, apparently you'd be a shitty parent. You should never have kids because that's what parents do is we sacrifice the things that we want to make sure that our kids have what they want.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, you have roots and it's not always easy to just yank them up. That's the reality of life.
Would I love to go back to where I came from and grew up? Yes, I would love it. I mean, I would fit right in. I would be able to go back in a heartbeat. It's not like being out here, knock the rough edges off.
Right.
I have to ask you. So I know you're going to know this so what do you think, and you see them on Cutlery Corner Network, but I tell the guys when we watch it, I have a gilded server where we'll watch Cutlery Corner Network and we'll bag on all the stuff. And they're like, oh, what is that? Michael Prater that does custom work on buck knives and Winchesters and stuff like that. And people are like, dude, that's a shitty Winchester for $600. And I'm like, no, that is a Winchester that Michael Prater took in his shop and made as good as it will ever be. What do you think about Michael Prater's work?
Honestly, I'm not familiar with it, so I'd have to take a look to know what you're talking about. If you want to pull something up on the screen, I'd love.
Yeah, let's see here. I'll see if I can.
But if you're telling me that there's a guy who's taking apart slip joints and making them the best it can be, I'm already going to like it. We just got to see if it's my style.
He does ones that he calls painted ponies and Michael Prater knives. Here, let me see if I can get some images. So he'll take like a buck knife or a case knife. Here's one. This is on Cutlery Corner. Let's pull this up. Let me share this screen. And so he'll do is he makes these scales. He makes them out of epoxy and colorings, or he'll use natural stone. And then he does like file work on the, he actually does really good work, but he's doing it on knives that I typically wouldn't associate. Why is this not working?
I think in that case, you know, it's almost just like he's treating it as a canvas, and you're buying artwork, like a knife you use for display and not for use. So I can see he's probably got his process down.
Oh, here's one. Here's one. This is a good example of one.
Right.
You see, can
I mean, okay. Up? Yeah, look at all that file work and everything. So I think that's cool. I mean, it's not my style particularly, but
here we go. There's a good image of it. Yeah. So like damn it. Did that come up? I'm trying to make sure I've got the right.
All screen. I see is the knife with I see like your Google search. There we go. Custom buck 532 buck lock.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is kind of the stuff that I'm seeing him do. And I find it attractive. It's not something I would buy, but people are like, it's $389 for a buck knife on Cutlery Corner Network. And I was like, yeah, but like, he's one of the few people that Buck actually authorizes to do this work. Like, he's an authorized customizer from Buck. Like, Buck has given him the ability to do it, and they'll still, like, if you sent that back to Buck, they would still honor the warranty. You know what I mean?
Right. No, I think, look, that's art. Art is not about logic. Art is about emotion, right? What some people find beautiful, other people find ugly. I mean, there's paintings. What is that? It's paint on canvas. Yeah, well, it's worth $150 million, you know? So it's, to me, I don't really like to judge other people's art and say what it should be worth. Like, I don't look at things that way. That artwork is worth what someone's willing to pay for it, because they appreciate what's been produced by someone's effort. That they have a real. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say this is the one I was talking about, the painted ponies. This is his go-to if you're going to get a buck. And it's going to be one of his nice ones. It's the painted ponies. I actually find that attractive, and I can.
It's got like a real, almost like a Native American or Old West sort of vibe to it. You know, it's interesting. I think it's cool. I not my style. I don't own stuff that looks like that, but you know, art is for people to enjoy as they see fit. You know, and I could see how someone would be like, man, that's really cool. I love having this in my house. I keep it in a display case. I keep it, you know, in the office, in the house, under glass, so I can appreciate it. Yeah. Because ultimately, that's someone's craftsmanship.
Like I said, that's stone. That's all stone. And I think he does most of it in stone. I was just curious. I figured maybe you already had seen it, because he's been around for years. Like, some of his knives are $700-800, but he doesn't actually make knives. He just customizes knives. He's like, he'll take stuff and just clean it up. But they are, any of the ones I've ever seen have been pretty well done. They're just, sometimes they just seem a little garish, but I dig it.
Sure. Yeah. It's like an engraved firearm. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, the engraver didn't make the gun, but he took it and absolutely went to town on the thing. And it's not anymore about the value of the gun underneath. It's about all the hours into all that super amazing scroll work and gold leaf and, you know, all that stuff. So
right. Go ahead.
I was going to say, you take a Colt 1911, like, it's a basic 1911, nothing super special, especially anymore with all the high ones you can go buy. But when a dude takes a Colt 1911 and puts like level 3 engraving into it, you're not going like, why'd you engrave that piece of crap? It's like, look at that work, you know?
You're going, holy shit, I want that.
Right.
One of the guns that I swear, like, if I ever get rich, I'm going to own one, is the Colt Super 38, the El Presidente, and it's the engraved. Yeah. They were made for the Mexican army. Because they carried the firearms of Super 38. I want one, but the last time I looked, a magazine for a Super 38, original 1911 Super 38, the magazine itself was like $250 just to buy a magazine for that gun, because there's so few of them. They sold some of them to the Mexican military. The Mexican military bought some, but the ones they bought were all like for like generals and stuff. And then they just never bought any more of them. And they carried Super 38s from other makers. But the ones that are around are like super highly engraved. Talking about somebody that engraves knives, I don't know how this was a gift from a couple of my friends. They got Elliot Williamson at Farron Forge Knife Works to custom make a knife. Basically, this was a knife that he had designed and that he custom engraved it when he was done. And that is an actual copper inlay that he left proud and left that spine when he carved it. I'm sorry, backwards. Carved it out because he knows I love when he does like the biomechanical stuff from like Alien and stuff like that. And so those guys, any chance I get to show this thing off, I love to. It's one of my favorite knives.
Really cool.
So that's all hand carved with a Dremel. So
you got a $2 donation and a question. I'll answer that. When will the Venom Jack be available? So appreciate the question, Adam. So I appreciate
the money, Aiden.
Right. Oh, Aiden. I'm sorry. I read that wrong. Aiden. My apologies there. I'm not releasing the whole schedule because, frankly, that's fluid in and of itself. So you'll always have 3 weeks before a knife becomes available so that you have time to consider buying it, and knives will become available on a monthly basis. That's the information I can provide.
That makes sense. Well, I mean, there's other companies. I think Spyderco did that last year. Like they didn't release their whole catalog. They released it in like segments. I think quarterly. They were doing something quarterly throughout the year.
One of the important things when you have a business is to have a rhythm. You need a rhythm because like that's how the world kind of works at like a pulse, at a beat. And so if you have a steady rhythm, people kind of can anticipate the flow of things, so to speak. And so what I really want is to have a pretty consistent manufacturing, packaging, distribution, sales rhythm. And the way I've got it timed is going to be releases just about on a monthly basis. Of course, there's factors outside of people's controls that happen, kind of disrupt the rhythm, but it all starts with a plan. And if you have a good plan, it's easier to adapt to changes versus if you're just kind of flying by the seat of your pants to begin with.
It's an old military phrase that I learned from a guy I worked for. He's like, we had done something and we screwed it up royal. And he was like, well, did you plan this out? And I was like, no, we just kind of threw it together. And he goes, mind your P's. And I was like, you mean mind your P's and Q's? He's like, no, mind your P's. Proper prior planning prevents piss poor performance. Mind your fucking P's. And I was like,
yeah,
I got you.
Yeah, it's a fact. I mean, for me mentally too, I really like to think things out. I'm analytical, probably overthink things, but nonetheless, I like to have a plan. I like to have kind of a roadmap, and of course you got to be flexible, especially as a business owner. But I think it's even better to have a plan to follow, have some goals, have your plan tied to your goals, revisit your goals on a quarterly basis, adjust your plan as necessary based on past performance to meet your future goals, stuff like that.
I wanted to ask, so we've talked about it a lot, but I don't know if everybody, a lot of the guys know about Jack Wolf knives, but tell us about the materials you're using, because like we said, we've been to this for an hour. We haven't really talked. You're bringing the slip joints into modern manufacturing, modern realm. So what kind of materials are you looking at making, and where are they being manufactured? Here?
Sure. Let's go over all that stuff. Yeah. So manufactured in China, that was where I was able to find manufacturers who can deliver the project and also at the quality that I needed these done. Not everybody likes knives made in China. I totally get it. I would love to have a USA made project. I'm actually working on one now to have a supplementary product line made in the USA, but boy, has that been a lot harder to do than it was to get my project going in China because the infrastructure
that's why
doesn't
mine
exist
are made there. Yeah, that's why my knives were made there. I just couldn't either I could not find someone willing to do it the way I wanted, or they wanted to charge me so much. And I'm like, look, I'm not trying to sell these myself. I want to license this design. Like, nope, we're still going to charge you $3,000 or between $1,500 and $3,000 for prototyping. I'm like, well, fuck you. I'll find somebody that does it the way I want it done for the price I need it.
Exactly.
I get it.
So made in China. Now, materials. There's two things we need to sort of frame this conversation in. It's materials, but it's also manufacturing methods and precision fitment of parts. This is something I want to communicate to everybody in the audience. So materials, blade steel, M390 for now. Of course, that can change in the future, depending on how well we're doing and what people want. But I thought M390 was a really good high-performance modern steel. The liners and bolsters, titanium. The handle material, which in slip joint terminology are called covers, micarta, and fat carbon fiber. Titanium hardware, screw together construction versus pinned or peened construction. Those are going to be the obvious differences between a traditional slip joint knife, which would have bone handles, wood handles, or I should say covers, nickel silver bolsters, sometimes brass liners or steel liners, and 1095 carbon steel. That's what you're going to find in your typical slip joint knife. Sometimes stainless steel, but patina, like 1095, that will take a patina. My blades are 120,000 stock, so about 3 millimeters. Your typical slip joint's going to be usually at the most 90 thousandths and sometimes less. I have really, really high, thin hollow grinds on my blades. My sharpshooter jack, which just released, measures 9 thousandths of an inch behind the edge. Super duper thin.
That is stupid thin. I love a good thin slicey knife.
It is slicey for sure. Whereas your typical slip joint knife or traditional slip joint knife is going to be flat ground almost all the time, or saber ground. Not going to have the same edge geometry, even though the blade stock is thinner. So those are going to be your primary differences in materials. Now, with modern traditionals, there are options, but they don't all offer the same fit and finish that my knives come with, and that's reflected in the price. So I'm often compared to the Italian knives from Fox, Line Steel, and Viper, made out of Maggiano. Now, those are excellent knives. They're around $100 to $150 less than mine. Where are the differences? Well, it's in the fit, finish, and construction. So, for example, blades. They are flat ground or machine ground, not ground by hand. They're usually tumbled or as ground finish, where mine are hand-applied belt satin. Mine are the high hollow grind that I originally mentioned. Their blade stock's 90 thousandths, mine 120 thousandths. So there's differences even between mine and theirs. But where you really start to notice the differences is in the fit and finish of the handle assembly. So if you look at a Jack Wolf knife, examine the spine, and you'll notice an absolute seamless transition between the blade spring and the liners. Because when those knives are made, the parts are assembled and then ground as an assembly so that all the parts are flat, flush, and smooth. And when that spring is operated from in the three positions, open, halfway, and closed, that back spring is dead flat and flush. On the Italian knives, what they do is they crown the liners, they crown the spring, they crown the blade spine, and they put a small chamfer where the blade spine meets the spring. Those are aesthetic treatments, and they look cool, but they're done not only for aesthetic reasons, but to essentially hide the fact that if those parts were squared off, none of that stuff would be flat and flush, because those parts are made individually en masse, thrown into parts bins, and then pulled for rapid assembly, whereas my knives are assembled and then ground as assembled, which is a process called hafting in the slip joint terminology. And that's a more labor intensive, certainly a skilled labor process. When you take apart if you take apart a Jack Wolf knife, which I do not recommend, and I advise against, we'll talk about that in a minute. But if you were to take one apart, and on a tangent, you can go to my website and watch me take one apart. I put it up on YouTube. If you got to know what's inside, I'll show you, maybe discourage you from doing it. I also show you how to put it back together if you just got to do it, right? But if you look inside, all the parts are individually numbered, because once their ground is assembled, they have to be mated for life. And so in the manufacturing process, now you've really slowed things down and made it's essentially a mid-tech. It's not a production knife, truthfully, because there's all this hand labor involved. And so now those parts are numbered. Now those parts have to track together through the manufacturing process. We can no longer mix and match. We cannot cross-contaminate.
I will tell you, my entire career in the military, all I did was firearms. I did small arms marksmanship, machine gun instruction. Everything is serialized because the matched wear and the way those parts fit together on those firearms, you really don't want. I mean, yeah, you can, but it's never going to be the same ever again if you get them separated. And I know exactly what you're talking about.
Exactly. And like if you take apart a Kalashnikov, like there's the bolts numbered, the dust covers numbered, the bolt carriers numbered, the barrels numbered, like all those parts are serialized because they were fitted. You know, so as an example to what you're saying, like some things can be manufactured for total part swappability. Jack Wolf Knives is not that. That's what's going to separate.
That is not your model.
No, I have to offer something that's different and unique in the market. Now, does it come at a higher price? It does. And a lot of people are turned off by it. And I understand that. But to say you're not getting something for the money is incorrect. What you're getting is essentially a factory made knife with custom knife features. The features, to me as a slip joint aficionado and a lover of these things, that I really find valuable, the things that separate a good slip joint from just something that was part slapped together. And that's the skilled labor that hafted that knife, ground it all perfect so it's flat, flush, and smooth, parts that fit together perfectly, this insanely satisfying walk and talk where the spring sends that blade to the half stop, sends that blade open, has that clickety clack that's just so fun to listen to.
They like do. I remember at Blade Show West, they definitely have the walk and talk.
It's all about that for me. And then at the end of the day, like it's got to perform. We need the knife to perform. And so that's why it's got that ridiculous grind on it so that you guys can use these things to slice like nothing else. I do not want people taking these knives and treating them as screwdrivers, treating them as pry bars. Like that's not what these things are. They're not a multi-tool. It's not your tactical knife you can dig a hole in the dirt with, you know, but you can slice the hell out of anything with these things. And that's really what your pocket knife primary function is. And really, if you're carrying a slip joint, that's your knife's only function, because you don't take a slip joint and thrust with it, you know, like it's not the kind of knife you're going to stab and thrust with, because in that event, maybe you close it on your hand, right? So it's really just a cutting tool, working, providing force against the work. As long as you're doing that, you're not going to close it on your hand, not in a million years. If you misuse it.
I actually mentioned that. I did a video, knives, like everybody talks about like the first knife for a knife. I did a video of knives I would recommend for first-time knife users. And as much as a lot of folks always were given the slip joints, that was the first knife they ever had. I was like, you know what? A slip joint is something that you give to somebody that has been in the knife community and learned and has a locking knife, and they've learned some of the things, and you teach them that, okay, that you can do this with this knife, but you can't with this knife. Because there's a lot of times brand new folks to the knife hobby will get a slip joint. They're like, yeah, I snapped one closed on my finger. And I'm like, that's one of those things that like you have to, I would prefer to give somebody a slip joint after they've gotten an appreciation for knives and be like, okay, check this out. This is really cool, but be careful with it, because now they've had some knives and they've been around them. They've opened and closed knives and they're like, oh, okay.
I can see that logic. What's interesting is if you give a slip joint to someone who's never opened one before and it's got a stiff spring, which you get used to slip joints, you don't want too weak of a spring. Mm-hmm. And the more you get used to them, the stiffer a spring you can appreciate. That's usually what I find. But you hand someone who's never opened a slip joint, one with a stiff spring, they'll start to open it. That resistance happens, and then they hesitate. Every time they hesitate, and then it'll go closed, and then they've immediately lost the confidence to work with that knife.
Yeah.
You know, and because they're afraid to get cut. It's like handing someone a gun who's never used it before. Like they immediately are afraid, you know? So I follow your logic there. I would think if you hand someone a slip joint and it's their first knife, we need to sit down and practice with it for sure.
Yeah.
I'm not just going to give you this and let you walk away. I got to make sure You know how it works.
That
You
was
need to
my
make sure you-
caveat. Yeah, that was my
Right.
caveat. Like, if you're going to give somebody a slip joint as their first knife, you better make sure that they know. Like, if you're just going to get somebody a knife, you're going to send it to them in the mail. I would be much more inclined to send them a lockback. Still 2-hand opening, 2-hand closing.
Yes.
But it's going to be much less likely to bite them.
You got to let me answer Knife Sharp's question. He's
I
asking
had
about
I had it written down, warranty, because we missed it the
So-
first time he put it up.
Right on. So I'm not the manufacturer, right? I don't own the manufacturing equipment. So I have to be careful what I offer as a quote unquote formal warranty. What I'm offering is a customer service promise. My customer service promise is that whatever problem you have with your knife, I will work with you to take care of it to the best of my ability and to make you completely satisfied. Whatever my power I have to do that. To make sure you're not getting a knife with defects to begin with, I hand inspect every single one of these things. I open them, I close them, I inspect them. I check for blade centering, I check for blade play. I check to make sure all the screws are in place. Like, I'm making sure you're not getting something in the box with missing parts or something that I wouldn't carry. So you're getting from me a complete inspection process. Now, if you have problems with your knife, we got to see what those problems are. I'm going to handle each one of those on a case-by-case basis. If there was some manufacturing defect that slipped through my fingers because I'm a human, I'll do whatever I can to take care of that at no cost to you. If you bust the knife because you misused it and it needs to get fixed, well, we need to talk about that. Maybe I'm able to fix that at no cost to you. Maybe there will be a small cost to you for the time and effort it takes to get that thing back to the factory and have it repaired or replaced. Maybe there's some things I'm unable to do because we made that knife last year and I don't have any more of them. I'm happy to refund your money in that case if that's the only way I can do my best to satisfy your needs. So I have what will be some of the best customer service in the industry. So call that a warranty, call it customer service, call it whatever you want. That's my commitment to you, the customer.
That's that's better than a lot of companies do. A lot of times you get a knife and then that's just it. Like, oh, well, yeah, we sent out a lemon, suck it up, buy another one. It was like,
right. Or they have a warranty. Oh, you guys have a warranty. Aren't you going to fix this? No, we don't think it's broken. Okay,
I mean,
now what?
Rick
Hinderer,
like,
are you going to?
Rick Hinderer, one of the, like, he has like a really good warranty, but there's still things that even like he doesn't warranty. Like, he's got a really, I know there was a bunch of shit that's been going on with Rick Hinderer in the knife thing. I know people are going to start talking about, well, about this, but like his warranty historically has been great. But there's just still some things that you just can't warranty, you know. It's just like there's some things that are going to just be issues that could happen, that could slip through the cracks. It's just not something they can warranty. You know what I mean?
Right. I think I understand why people feel a sense of security from a warranty, but when you really think about it, it's the customer service provided by the brand that's the most important thing. Because even if a brand has a warranty, if their customer service people are dicks, or if they do a crappy job, you send it off. Oh yeah, send that in. We'll fix it. Right. 2 months later, you get something back in the mail. It's exactly the same as when you send it.
Oh, you're talking about Benchmade.
You know? Right. Like, pick your right. It's like, oh, they got the best warranty in the business. You gotta almost worry about that. You know, it's like, who has the best customer service in the business?
I've said that for years, and everybody that watches my channel can tell you, like, I have said it so many times in videos. Like, oh, but they've got a warranty. So fucking what? A warranty is not a fucking replacement for quality. If I'm going to send out a shit knife that I'm going to fucking warranty to shit, like, okay, you can only polish a turd so much. Yeah, I sent you a warranty. I've got a warranty. I'm going to replace your garbage knife with another garbage knife. That's basically what a lot of times a warranty winds up being these days. There are some companies like Benchmade actually does do a pretty good job on their warranty. It's just that their sharpening is horrible. Christian Ortiz here is a friend of mine over at Cerberus Knives. Disassembly voids the warranty. That one's never made sense to me. On a slip joint, like with the Jack Wolf knives and things like that.
No, he's talking about pieces. Like Microtech. You know,
yeah, like this.
Like that, I think. Right.
I've set knives in Microtech. I've disassembled. They don't even know.
Right. So Christian's a friend of mine too. I was actually out in California not that long ago. We were hanging out. So he's the man. Yeah. So shout out to Christian. And if you guys haven't seen it on Instagram, he got a brand new compressor, and he's about to have some really cool stuff coming out because he's now got the capacity to
bigger than him.
Yeah, I think he was telling me he almost died getting it off the truck. So he's gonna.
I told him not to blow his pants off in the shop with the zipper open because he'd get air down his pee hole and turn it into a windsock, and it just would never be the same again.
That is an awful mental picture.
I can paint one. I can definitely paint one.
Oh man. So, but about taking apart the slip joint. So here's what I got to say about that. The problem with taking it apart is it can be a real pain in the butt to put it back together. That's the problem here. It's not that like, oh, I don't want you to take it apart because there is no other reason. I don't want you to have trouble. There's a spring under tension and you're going to fight that sucker. And the first few times you do it, it's not going to go the way you want. And you're probably going to scratch your scale, or you're going to scratch this, or you're going to drop that and lose this. And if you don't blue tape the blade, you're going to cut yourself. And it's like, ultimately, there's no good reason to do it. That's the other thing is like, guys, slip joints have been around since about the 1600s, and no one took them apart to maintain them. No one took them apart to maintain them. You just need to oil the joint, oil the tank.
I used to say, I think this is 41 years old. Right.
It's never been disassembled for routine maintenance.
Never once.
Right. So it's like, just because you can doesn't mean you should. That's the logic that applies to the Jack Wolf knives. But like I said, there's a video on I got 3 videos on my website. Number 1, reasons not to disassemble your knife. Number 2, how to maintain your knife without taking it apart. And number 3, if you insist on taking this apart, or you just have to know what's inside, I'll show you.
Here's a video.
Right. But please don't take the stupid thing apart, because I don't want you to have a problem that could have been avoided. That's my position. I'll never tell someone what to do with their property. I'll never be like, I won't service that if you take it apart. I'm not like that, you know?
Yeah.
But I will say, like, dude, I really encourage you not to take that apart. You know, please take my advice.
I'm sitting here and I'm looking at this one and I'm like, I don't know how I would need a punch and a screwdriver.
Exactly. You need tools. You need specialty tools to take that apart.
And
if you take that apart, right? Exactly. If you take that thing apart and you even have the skill to put it back together, they don't always go back together the same, because it was peened and it was like in its happy spot. And you relieve that tension that's been in that metal for decades, you know, and then try to sandwich it back together just perfect. You're going to have gaps where you didn't have them before, period.
Yep. Yeah. Or your blade winds up off center, or it's rubbing the liner. Yeah. It never winds up good.
Chuck It says, I've never been nervous to disassemble any knife. Just in my Pina, Apache, and Copper. It's 1/20th made. I don't know what you mean by it's 120 made, mission successful. But I understand your sentiment. Like, man, and let's be clear. Some people are a lot more comfortable with tools and working with their hands and taking stuff apart than other people. So take what I'm saying as a recommendation, apply it to your use case appropriately. You know, if you have strong hands, if you have a bench vise, if you have the mindset to solve a problem with disassembled parts, you'll do a lot better than someone who like never takes stuff apart, you know, because once you pop that spring tension, it's like, damn it, now how do I get this back together? And I even show you guys how to do it in the video. I do it with a bench vise. That sharpshooter jack, I have a really hard time doing it with just hand strength alone.
Well, the springs on your knives, if I remember right, they were pretty stiff. Like they were
correct. It varies from model to model because each one is unique in its design. But that one is on the upper end, and this is the one coming out first. So it's why I'm just telling people, like,
that's the one I like the most, by the way. The one that just came out, and I didn't realize they had come out. I wouldn't have had the money for it anyway, but I just realized that they came out, and I saw everybody was like, "Oh, which one was it?" And I couldn't remember it by name, and I went and looked at it, and I was like, I saw it, I was like, that's the one that I liked so much when I was at Blade Show West. That's the one that I saw, and I was like, yeah, I really like that one.
That one, I picked it to be first because it really seemed to appeal to a lot of people everywhere I took it.
Yeah,
I thought it was a good one to start. You don't see a lot of gun stocks. It's not the biggest one I make. It's not the smallest one I make. It's kind of right there in the middle. And so It's got a really striking appearance. It's a clip point blade. I think based on all the temperatures I've taken, that the clip point blade is the most popular blade shape of the traditional knives that I've demonstrated to people. People love
on a
clips,
traditional,
points. Yeah,
a clip
There's
point on
just
a traditional, just it's got a pop to it. It just looks really good. Like all of the traditionals that I've ever bought always had a clip point blade, all of them, unless it was like a trapper or like a muskrat where it was a thinner blade, or a trapper where you've got you've got your
spade blade.
But all of them have been a clip, and because it's attractive, it looks nice on a smaller blade. It gives it a pop.
They are absolutely attractive. They are attractive. And that's what it boils down to. Like the straight edge knives, like a sheep's foot or a Warncliffe, I mean, so freaking practical, so easy to sharpen, cuts like a freaking laser beam, but doesn't have the aesthetics of a swoopy clip, but to each his own. That's what's cool about traditional knives. You can get them in just about any flavor. But I thought starting with the clip point gun stock pattern made a lot of sense.
I have a knife, and I don't want to show everyone my crotch as I walk by. I had a knife come in that kind of reminded me of you, and that's when I saw that you were on Jared's channel. I got one of these in, and this is that clip point Appalachian Drifter 2 by We Knife Company. And the reason it made me think of you is it looks more like a traditional. It's a front flipper. It is a front flipper liner lock, but it's got that deep hollow. It's got the clip point blade. And I was like, you know what, I need to get a hold of Ben over at Jack Wolf Knives. That's what made me start looking for your information. I saw you on Jared's channel, and this reminded me so much of the Jack Wolf Knives because it had that profile. It reminded me a lot of what I saw when we were at Blade Show West. And this knife coming in from my buddy was like, oh, I need to get a hold of Ben and get him on the podcast.
That's a handsome knife for sure. That's really cool. It's
attractive. Cuts so well. It's like you said, it's got that high hollow up onto it.
Yep.
And it just comes down to almost nothing behind the edge.
Yeah.
Just so good.
I like a knife that cuts good. I don't, for my day-to-day life, I do not need something that can double as a torquing tool, a pry tool. Like that's not my needs. So something that can cut really well, I find the most useful. And once I kind of got spoiled on that, I just look at like thick blade stock and with flat grinds, and I'm like, that looks like a wedge to me. Like that looks like something that I could, like dig something out of the ground with if I needed to, which is totally cool, but I don't need to do that very often,
Yeah, there's some companies that have been doing a good job. I got this as a gift, and this surprised me because it's called the PMP Big Boy, and I wear triple XL gloves. So that's a big knife. It's like it's just about 9 inches overall, but they did a really good job. They didn't use too thick a blade stock, and then they did a really good job on bringing that grind down to where you've got a substantial knife, you've got a lot of stability, but this thing is super thin behind. I think when I measured this, I think it came out just a little bit over 0.01, like just put like 0.0105, 0.0108, something like that. And I mean, it just kind of fell in just in that Goldilocks zone where I've got a really good thin blade, but I still got enough blade stock and thickness. It's good and stable for big cutting tasks. So it's
nice and tall. Like it's a tall blade. So you can get that angle right. Yeah, that looks good.
Yeah, it's a really nice knife. I like it. It was a gift from one of my paying members on the channel.
Cool.
I wanted to talk to you about the packaging because of all the stuff, I kind of saved it towards the end. Of all the things, like the knives are awesome. The knives are great. It's the packaging that kind of appeals to me because you're kind of doing traditional packaging, but with like a modern twist with the tubes, but you're also doing like artwork that is like was it Marvel or was it DC?
Yeah.
Was it Marvel? Was it a
Marvel
artist or DC?
Well, he's a comic book he's a comic book artist who's done work for Marvel, but he does other stuff too. Like he's for hire,
Yeah.
But people familiar with Marvel, so that's usually the example I give. But the dude is just ultimately a super talented artist. And so, yeah, let's kind of talk about the packaging. So
that packaging was awesome. Like that's what caught my eye when Justin from Fiberlight was like, "Hey, you need to go over and talk to Jack Wolf Knives." I was like, "I'll get over there." And then David from Hiking with the Viking, because he was working with Justin over at he's like, have you been over there yet? And I was like, "I'll make it over there." And they were like, "Dude, get over there." And I came over and I saw the packaging and all the artwork, and I was like, "How the fuck did I miss this on my trips around?" Okay, we need to talk.
Yeah, so here's kind of the thought process there. Like, first of all, a couple things. When you go to these knife shows, what you see is a ton of like amazing knives. There are amazing knives as far as the eye can see, right? And so as a new company and a new brand, I need a way to stand out. I need a way to go above and beyond what other people are doing. That's one thing. The other thing that I think is important is understanding that when we buy knives that are at a luxury price, they're no longer just for utility. They're for emotional satisfaction and utility. We're buying functional art. It's like the oldest form of art. Like, man has been embellishing his tools since he invented the freaking tools to begin with. Because if all we needed was something that cut, we would just go buy something that holds disposable razor blades and that'd be it. But we like them for more reasons than that. And I think we can be ourselves about that we get emotional satisfaction. Are we doing all right?
Yeah, you froze. You froze up for a second, and I'm going through. I forgot that I'm supposed to keep track. I did a thing. Okay, so not to interrupt you, I did a thing where I bought all those mystery knives on Cutlery Corner. These horrible Frost cutlery knives, and I told everybody if we hit $400 before the end of the week, I would put my $1,000 Norseman in its case, which is this is my everyday carry. This is always in my pocket. Like, I carry other things for review and stuff like that, but I told them I would put this in its case and carry one of those horrible $5 Frost cutlery knives that I ordered. And everybody's like, have we hit 400 yet? And I was like, I forgot to write down the totals for the super chats that I was getting. So
Knife Sharp asked if you could.
We'll address that. We'll address that in the after show, because I've got whiskey and I've got time.
Knife Sharp asked if you could put up a picture of the packaging. There's actually a good picture on my website. Go to the Sharpshooter Jack listing, and pick one of the knives, and then there's like 6 pictures of the knife, and one of them is the packaging laid out.
Okay.
So while you do that, I'll kind of keep trucking. So knives are functional art. I believe that. I believe that's why we like to buy more knives than we need, quote unquote need. I think that's why we really appreciate stuff that we think is cool. I think that's why we appreciate the stuff that makes us smile. I think that's why you're willing to buy $1,000 Norseman, right? Because if you're looking at it strictly logically, that's an illogical decision. But these are not only logical decisions, they're also emotional decisions. So that's why I love collecting knives, because they make me feel good. I like owning them. I like looking at them. I like appreciating the craftsmanship. I like appreciating the art. I like the art form of the knife, right? So in that thought process about art appreciation, I started thinking about how to make my project more of an art appreciation experience with functional art. And so then I started thinking about how traditional knives have been historically packaged. So if you take a Great Eastern cutlery knife, it comes in a cardboard tube with these like plastic pop caps on the end, and a sticker on the tube with artwork on it. And it's usually stuff that harkens back to like the Old West or the early 1900s. And it gives you an emotional satisfaction of appreciating that packaging. And that's like part of the fun of collecting those things. And that it means something to somebody, because if like you're dumb enough to throw those tubes away, now your knife is worth substantially less because you have the tube.
Guys, never ever throw your knife packages away. I have literally sold knives that I could have sold for $800-900, did not realize that the packaging was that big of an issue, and then just kept them because I don't have the original packaging.
Right, because it matters. It matters to people, and I understand why it matters to people, because these are not strictly logical purchases. They're They're emotional and logical purchases, and that's okay. Like I think we need to embrace that we do some of this stuff because we like it. We don't always have to give logical reasons for this stuff. Like the fact you enjoy it alone is a logical reason to me. So anyway, I'm looking at how traditional knives are made. They come in tubes. I love those tubes, and everything you buy comes in a box, right? Everything you buy. Nothing comes in a tube. And to me, that's just so cool to change the form factor. So I was like, man, I've got to figure out a way to do tubes. So then I started investigating different types of tube packaging, and I came across these aluminum extruded tubes. And I was like, those are freaking perfect. You know, they come with a screw cap lid. Underneath the lid, there's like a sealant. So it's actually a functional piece of, it's functional. Like it's airtight. So let's say you want to
if you're not going to carry that knife for a while and you want to throw it down in there with a thing of desiccant, like a little silica pack, you could.
There's already desiccant in there, my friend. It comes with it. Yeah,
brilliant. That's brilliant.
So you got this cool tube, like, dude. You could, let's say you wanted to keep that knife in your fishing tackle, screw that thing in the tube, throw it in there. Let's say you just want to keep those tubes up on your desk and keep Q-tips in them or whatever. You know, you could keep different types of plants in there that you might want to keep fresh. Use your imagination, right? So what I'm saying,
they all know what you're talking about. I partake. I partake heavily of the jazz cabbage.
You partake in the devil's broccoli. So what we're saying there is that tube is not just packaging for the sake of packaging. It's functional, but it's also artistic. So for example, if you look at the lid, that lid is embossed. That embossing was not easy to achieve. I had to buy 12,000 of those lids to meet the minimum order quantity required to get that embossing done. Plus, they charged me a fortune for the stamping die. But when I knew how amazing it would look, I was like, how can I not do it? How can I not do it? Like, if I don't do it, I'm not doing my customers the service they deserve, and I'm doing this project disservice, you know, because in the end of the day, it's well worth the investment. So I wanted, so that embossing is an artistic embellishment. Then I wanted to do something really cool for the label. And so that's when I started thinking about custom artwork and the type of artwork that I like looking at. And I always thought comic book art was freaking really cool. Like comic book art and album art from like,
well, you and I aren't that far apart. You guys, we're really not that far apart in age. Like you were born in like what, 1980? I was born in 74, 80. Like 6 years apart.
Right. I mean, right.
We grew up in the golden age. Could have been
my older brother.
Yeah, we grew up in the golden age of album art and comic book art, and like it's never going to be as good as it was back then. And you're right, there is something that harkens back to that in this packaging.
That's what I was going for, and so because I want people to have a nostalgic experience, I want them to have an art appreciation experience. I want people to think like this is freaking cool. You know, that's my goal. You get this thing and you're like, hell yeah. Like, this is awesome. You know, the whole experience is awesome. Not, I opened up packaging, threw all that crap away, and now my knife is awesome. I wanted the whole thing to be awesome because I feel like a lot of brands don't do that.
Do they come with the leather slip? I can't remember. I know I asked you.
Everything you see there is in every purchase.
Now, are you going to start selling the leather slips as a secondary item, like a secondary purchase, like people can?
It comes inside the can. You don't need.
I know, but like
in case someone needs one.
I have a leather slip for a specific item. It's a gravity knife that I have a leather slip for, but I have a lot of knives that I would love to just be able to take the pocket clip off of because they're so much more comfortable that way. A pocket slip is that perfect option.
Totally. Frankly, I'm to the point where I don't really even like using a clip on a knife. I like having them in my pocket because I wear shorts almost all year round. I'm in the desert, right? And so when you wear a pocket clip on shorts, you basically lose the pocket. You can't get your hand in there, you know, depending on how your pockets are cut. So yeah, it's, but I'm not, here's the thing. There's a lot of really good leather craftsmen who do stuff on Instagram. And I would encourage you to build a relationship with one of those guys, like a Lancelot leather, like a sage grouse.
That's exactly.
Like a Northwoods leather.
Well, I was going to talk with Lancelot Leather because while I like a pocket slip, I want something that's maybe soft leather on one side, a little bit coarser, like rawhide on one side, where it's folded over so it slips over the side of my pocket. I can stick them down in almost like a pocket protector. You remember the kids we used to beat up in high school?
You're talking about like inside out on one side, like a
like so it folds over and it just kind of like, so I don't have to have the clip on my knife and the slip acts as a clip. That's something I've thought of, and I was going to talk with Lancelot Leather about that. Actually,
you should. And so that's why I'm not going to sell. That's why I'm not going to sell leather slips, because I'm getting them in bulk from a Chinese manufacturer. So they're coming in cheaper than any of these American guys can do stuff for. And I'm not going to undercut them to make a couple bucks on leather slips. Like that's, that one doesn't feel right to me. So I would encourage anybody.
And it's fair. And that's how the knife community works. Like we all like the knife community is just a big family. There's some outliers that are just complete assholes, but like we generally it's just a big, fun family community.
Totally. And that's, dude, it's the best community, right? It's the best community. So I don't know, back to the packaging, unless you want me to stop rambling about it, but
no, you can go about it. I do. We can run late too. I'm not like Jared, like we could hit like 2 hours and never go. I am going to do an after show though, to address the issues with this whole thing back here.
So each knife has its own custom artwork on the can. You'll see a character. It's Jack Wolf. So we created a character. He's like a wolf man, and he's featured on all the tube art. My plan is that let's say I run the sharpshooter Jack again. It could be a year before I make more of those, because I've already got 11 models in the catalog. Well, at one model a month, that's 11 months. And in fact, there's more models that have been developed. Some of them I haven't revealed. They're staying up my sleeve for a while. And so when I do come back around and make more sharpshooters, I'm going to change that artwork.
I was hoping. That's why you saw me start smiling. I was like, please tell me each run is going to be different artwork.
Exactly. And that's like, it's not very much. Like, you guys I think you'd be pleasantly surprised. There's not a lot of extra cost to the consumer for this stuff. I buy everything in bulk to bring the price down, because I know I'm already asking a lot for these knives, and I'm not asking a lot to make a ton of money. Like, the dealer has to get paid. The knives are expensive to make, and I got to make some money. I make less than the freaking dealers, guys, but there's so much effort that goes into developing all those art concepts. Like, it's hours and hours of time, and I do it because I love it, and I want you guys to love it. So some people look at the packaging like, man, I wish you didn't include all that stuff so I can get this stuff a little cheaper. And it's like, I think you're kind of missing the point. You wouldn't be saving that much money if I didn't include this stuff, but you're certainly getting something that I think is super freaking cool.
Okay. I wanted to touch. So me as a knife designer, I don't have as much hands-on with it, but you as the company, I wanted to get this out of the way. So everybody talks about this. I usually don't like to talk about this, but Chinese made knives. So this was not something that was on my list. This just kind of popped up because you were talking about the vendors and the dealers and all that. And you basically get you get what's left.
I get what's left.
So I have friends that are also knife designers and own a knife company. They have their stuff made offshore. And we talk about it, and people are like, they're throwing a fit about money going to China. And the amount of money that winds up actually going to China is it's a much smaller amount than a lot of people think. The majority, the lion's share of that goes to shipping, which is USA shipping, USPS, vendors, vendor costs, dealer costs, all that stuff. And then the actual designer gets like what's left, which is a little bit. And then China gets like their cut. The majority, if I remember correctly, my friend Elliot told me that anywhere between 50 and 70% of that, like he did the math, about 50 to 70% of that money all stays within the United States between vendors and dealers and cost of like shipping and all that. That's where that money, a lot of it winds up going.
Right. Your whole purchase price is not going to China, guys. It's not.
Actually a small, it's like maybe 20% of it, if that.
Yeah, it all depends on the business model and the cost to manufacture said knife. Like knives that are made by stampings, knives that are made with minimum order quantities over 1,500, like cheaper unit prices, stuff like that.
Mhm.
My knives are actually expensive to make. Like
Froze.
these things. Oh, can you hear me?
Oh no, this was important. Oh, is he back?
I can see me.
Oh, there you go. You're back. You're back. You're back. I was like, this is, I really wanted to talk about this, but it froze up.
Right on. Are we still good?
Yeah, we're good. We're good. We got you.
Cool. So not all Chinese knives are the same. Not any manufacturing methodology, regardless of where it is on earth, is the same. You know, knives that are made, you can stamp a lot of parts quickly for cheap. It's the upfront tooling that's expensive, but once you build the tooling, you can crush these things out by the thousands, right? And so that's how high volume knife companies get these big margins, is because they invest in tooling up front, stamp out thousands, tens of thousands of parts, and then recoup their costs on the tooling rather quickly. And then there's really big margins in there for distributors, dealers, the overhead of these large knife companies, and profits. So my stuff is different. I mean, mine's got substantial handwork in it. So these are costing, I know for a fact, more than a lot of the Chinese made high-end locking knives, because a lot of the locking knives are assembled by hand. Yes, someone screws it together, and oftentimes the blades are ground by hand, but all the parts are machine made. Where my knives, the blades are ground by hand, they're assembled by hand, and then there's hand labor involved in making them. And they're expensive to produce, but I'll be damned if I was going to cheapen that product, because that's not what I was going to put my name on or my grandfather's name on. It wasn't going to happen. It was going to be the standard I wanted to sell it, or I would just go do something else. I'd find something else to do, you know? So in the case of my knives, I'm not marking these things up. I'm marking it up enough to pay the dealer. I'm marking it up enough to pay me enough to keep doing it, you know, but it's not the kind of thing where, hey, this is a cheap Chinese knife and this should only be, he's right. Exactly.
Yeah. Well,
right.
and
so read that for the viewers.
Yeah. The machines are machines and machinists are machinists. Smart fixturing and toolware data, which anyone can do, is going to contribute to a good product regardless of where they are made. And that's right. It's really, he's absolutely right. He's absolutely right. And
expertise, skill, and work ethic.
Christian's a brilliant knife designer, and he really has a head for business. That's why he's making more money than I am.
So, yeah, I mean, we kind of got off on a tangent, but
yeah.
Circle me back. We were talking about packaging.
We were talking about the fact we were talking about packaging, and we got onto like the amount of money that actually, the majority of the money from these products that are done offshore, the OEM being done offshore, the majority of that money actually winds up in the coffers of the vendors and stuff like that here in the United States. Like, yes,
yeah, I
have to pay.
I wouldn't try to put a number on that, but what I would say is, if you know, for anybody listening who has consternation of buying a Chinese knife, like, I get it. I totally get it. But like, look at the case by case basis. Is the person an American who's running the business? Like, are they currently employing or trying to employ eventually Americans? You know, are they working with American dealers? So like, you're helping the American economy grow too. It's not like we're writing checks to like Jinping, the emperor, or whoever's over there, you know. Just something to think about, you know. But ultimately, this is not food, this is not water, this is not shelter, and I'll never tell someone how they should spend their money, you know. But we like to talk about this kind of stuff, so if anything, it's food for thought.
Well, and like I said, I always have to tell people, like, oh, well, you had your knives made by a Chinese company. I was like, no, I had my knives made by an American company. They just happen to have their stuff made in China. They're like, oh, no, well, Artisan's not. I was like, no, Artisan is owned and operated by an American citizen in Chino Hills, California. They make really good knives. They just happen to have them made in China. Like, oh, well, they're with CJRB. I was like, no, the owner of Artisan is really good friends with the owner of CJRB. CJRB just happens to be in China. The owner is Chinese. They grew up together. They're friends. And David that owns Artisan moved to the United States, is a United States citizen. And it just kind of made sense that if David's already here, that a lot of times they share the same space at a table because it saves money for his friend to not have to come to the United States to show their knives. And it's just like, I have to explain that to people constantly, like, oh no, bullshit. You're a China apologist. I'm like, dude, think whatever you want. I don't really care. I had a design that I liked. I didn't really care if I made very much money on it. I had a viable design and I wanted to get it in the hands of people. And I found a way to get it done at an affordable price point. I didn't think it was a knife that should have cost more than $100. And it came out and it's been successful. There has not been a quarter since it came out that I did not make money, which means that it has sold more than my first knife design, because my first knife design, the original run of 400 pieces, is still, half of them are still sitting on shelves.
Right.
So
yeah, it's like, it's one of those conversations. It's like Ford versus Chevy, right? Like the conversation will never go away. And I'm always willing to have it if someone's willing to be civil and respectable in the dialogue. Some people get real childish about that topic real fast. And I'm not super interested in engaging with people who are not trying to, have a respectable discussion. But at the same time, it's like, at the end of the day, if you don't like it, don't buy it. And that's pretty much all that really needs to be said. Like, I'm offering this. I'm not forcing it on you. If you don't like it, I can respect your decision. You don't have to buy it. That's really what it boils down to. Someone did ask me a question. I wanted to answer it real quick. It's Chuck.
Which one?
He says, Ben, specific reason behind choosing the POG. We kind of moved on from packaging, but the reason I chose the POG, I guess there's a couple reasons. A lot of the traditional knife, well, I guess Great Eastern does it, and I think it's a thing beyond them. When you buy a knife from them, they give you a small lapel pin, like a round one that you would wear on your lapel, or like if it was the 80s, you'd wear them on your G jacket,
Yeah.
And I always thought that, and there's artwork on the pin, and I always thought that's like really cool, but I never do anything with the pins. I keep them in the tubes and I put them away. And I thought, I'm not going to copy the pin. Like, I don't want to do the pin, but I want to do something that sort of pays respect to the concept, but with my own spin. And then I started thinking about the fact that the tube is a cylinder and that whatever I come up with should be round. And then it was like, POG. Like, holy crap, can someone make me a POG? And I found someone to make me POGs. And this dude perfected it. He'd been through all kinds of different paper stock until he found the perfect cardboard stock. And he's got the dimensions consistent with the World POG Federation. And I also saw it as an opportunity to put
there's a World POG Federation?
POG Federation. There's standardizations for the POGs. And it also gives me an opportunity to display the artwork, right? So because the artwork is on the tube, and to appreciate the artwork, you have to in the tube, which is something you have to consider when you design the artwork. But that's like, I digress. The POG lets you appreciate the artwork in 2D. So I just thought it was cool, man. I wanted people to have a nostalgic 90s vibe. I wanted to have something as a token. I wanted to have a way to, see? Dude, POGs had some really cool artwork.
You said that, and I'm like, all right, talk about whatever you want to talk about. I've got to look this up.
You're like, you just said that as if everybody knows what you're talking about. It's like, yeah, that's a thing, the World POG Federation.
Holy shit! Because
his POGs were like 20 thousandths of an inch in diameter or less than World POG Federation or something, and he's like, do you want my old size or do you want the POG Federation size? I'm like, dude, POG Federation, bro. We got to standardize.
That's the same response I had. I was like, wait a second, that's a fucking thing.
That's a thing. So Chuck, and I hope that answers your question. You said maybe a challenge coin in the future. Well, with POGs, there was something called slammers. The slammer was a heavier, either metal or plastic, thicker disc that you use to strike the POGs when you play the game, which is a game of, you play it against someone else, you throw the slammer at the POGs, whichever ones flip upside down, you get to keep or something. I never played the game.
It was like, I never played it either, but it was kind of like marbles. Like, I played marbles as a kid. Like, you had your shooter and you had the marbles, and whatever you knocked out and stuff like you got to keep. And
Dude, it's for people who have like, it really came from milk caps is where it started. It started in like the 1930s when the milkman would deliver milk and there were these cardboard caps on top of the milk and they would put advertisements on them. And like, you know, in the Depression, no one had any money, but you still want to play. So you'd collect these milk caps and then they invented a game. You know, it's like playing a game with rocks, you know, like you'll play with anything when you're a kid.
I grew up poor. We didn't have indoor plumbing. I grew up poor. We played with anything we could. We used corn cobs as grenades and sticks as guns and played cowboys and Indians and war out in the cornfields.
Right, exactly. And so that's where slammers, or that's where the game came from, was the fact that guys were making do with what they had. So it's kind of got a cool history. I want to. Each knife will come with a POG inside. The POG matches the artwork. So like your knife is pretty unique, right? Because that artwork is going to change the next time I reproduce it. The POG is going to change the next time I reproduce it. If I can get the factory to do it, which I think I can, I want to tweak something about the knife too. So next time I make a sharpshooter, something on that knife is not going to be the same. So really, that production run was unique. You know, like those marble fat carbon fiber sharpshooter jacks in that specific configuration with that artwork, like that's all there was of those. And someone asked me earlier, I saw a question, why does all the knives on your website have no fat carbon, only the sharpshooter has it? The answer to that is all those knives on that website except the sharpshooter, those are prototypes. That's photography of prototypes. And I did not buy prototypes in fat carbon. I didn't want people to know I was planning on doing that. That was kind of a surprise. So production models will have 4 variations, one of which is fat carbon. So each month there will be the 3 micartas and a fat carbon. Now I'm going to say this right now. Those fat carbons blew the freaking door off today. So if fat carbon is what people want from me, and that's like what I start seeing consistently as the months go on, I will consider kind of maybe doing 1 micarta and 3 fat carbons or something. Like if that's what everybody wants, I'm not opposed to doing that.
Just don't make it harder for me to get a don't make it harder for me to get a micarta one. I fat carbon fiber is attractive, but
I got to look at the data, and maybe I do 2 and 2. I don't know. I'm saying I'm paying attention to what people want. I'm not super rigid. So
that's what you have to do.
Right.
You've got to appeal. You got to appeal to your customer base. If that's what they want, then like, you know. It's just one of those things in business, just like I've had some complaints about I changed some of the content on the channel. I'm like, yeah, but this is the thing. This is what people are watching more. Why wouldn't I provide more of that content if that's what more people are watching?
Right.
It just makes sense.
Are you in the business of just making art that you are unwilling to compromise or sacrifice? Are you in the business of making something you want people to consume? And if you're making something that you want people to consume, you better figure out what they want to consume. You know, obviously you have to balance that with your sensibilities on your design and your language and your brand identity and all that. But like a good business person typically is going to be flexible and paying attention to what their customers want. So anyway, I'm just kind of throwing it out there. Guys, tell me what you want, you know? You know, you vote with your dollars more than anything, but I really like to listen to what people tell me they want. I'm not going to do everything everybody wants, but I'll certainly listen to what everybody has to say. That I promise you.
I had one last question I had written down, and I know that some people are going to ask, like you said, you can't please everyone all the time, and you got to stay true to what you want. But have you thought of finding a way that you could incorporate a removable pocket clip for people that would want them?
Yes.
And
the answer is yes, because that's the strongest request I've gotten.
Okay.
That's the strongest request I've gotten. To date, the modern knife guys want a pocket clip on the thing. Now,
I don't.
Out of the gate was,
like if I was going to get one of your knives, I'd be absolutely fine. Like just leave the pocket clip at the shop and sell it to put it in a box with somebody else's knife and save yourself that machining. But yeah, I know that I knew that was probably one that you had gotten hit up with already.
Yeah. Given I've got a design in mind, when it's going to happen, I don't know yet. It's got to be prototyped and perfected. I'm not going to do it poorly. And so it's going to have to be removable, because I want that pocket clip to be able to be removed and carried. I want that, at least this is my original thought on it. Like let me just provide that disclaimer. My thought process is at this time is I want it to be removable, presumably reversible, although I don't know if it really matters. So that's kind of a question mark to me, because you're going to pull it out and you need two hands to open it. So as long as like the design is more or less symmetrical, I don't think it necessarily matters which side the clip is on. But I want it to be removable, and it needs to work well, and it needs to look good. I'm not going to destroy the aesthetics of what is a timeless classic pattern with a doo-doo pocket clip. You know, not going to do it.
Yeah, no, that was.
Yeah,
that
he
was
says I'd rather have a clip slip. That's always an option. A clip slip is a great option.
Yeah.
Let me plug something here real quick. OCD for EDC. Him and Lancelot Leather produced some clip slips with the Jack Wolf Knives logo on it. Like Justin made the stamp on his 3D printer, and Lancelot produced them to Justin's design, and it has the Jack Wolf head on it. So if you guys want to buy a Jack Wolf knife with a clip slip that's branded, go buy from Justin and pick one of those up. Like it's handmade by Lancelot. It's nice.
Justin is Justin is one of those guys that is like the epitome of entrepreneurship. Like he's making the things for the Spyderco knives. He's selling your knives and he's doing his own little take on it. And I like Justin. He's a good dude. And he's a stand-up guy. He stands up for what he believes in. And
absolutely,
that's the kind of guy you want. That's the kind of guy you want marketing your stuff and selling your stuff.
Yeah, they've been great. I mean, they don't have the same exposure as the big guys, so that's why like guys in the audience are wanting to support me. I'm asking you to support him. I don't favor him over any of the other dealers, but he's less known. So if I'm going to sit here with you guys on a Friday night, because we're a sense of community, there's a dude right now who's probably packing boxes or working on something for his channel or whatever. He's doing something for the knife community right now. So I would feel real good telling you to support him.
I would say that in this community, on this channel, the 44, 45 people that are watching right now, I guarantee there's not a single person in this chat that does not know Justin over at EDC. That's some of these smaller channels like mine and Cole over at Tri-State, Bees Blades. We share like the same guys that are. That's why there's a guy on Instagram that has built a calendar, and like he posts up every day which channels are going to be live at which time. So it's almost like TV Guide for some of the smaller knife channels that do lives. Like I go live 3 days a week, and he's like, "What's your schedule?" And I'm like, "Why?" And he goes, "Oh, I have a calendar, and I make sure that I post it where everybody can find what the schedule is for channels that are going live." And I was like, "All right, that's cool. I like that." So future plans. I know that you've got a bunch of designs. This is the last question I had for you because I know it's been like 2 hours. You probably have shit to do. Do you have any future plans for new designs, or are you going to kind of stick with the ones you got and rotate them through and then look at it in the future and see? Or do you already have things in mind that you want to add to the line of knives?
I definitely want to add to the line. In fact, I'm like itching to get back to design because I've been so busy getting this thing launched, especially over the last 3 or 4 months, that I've not had. You can't just like work in an hour of design work. At least I can't. I need to basically spend the weekend like tunneled into that CAD and like in this crazy zone where hours can go by and it feels like minutes. So I want to add more products to the line. I'd like to have 25 slip joint models. That's like my goal. I don't know if I'll get that far, but I don't want to stop at 14. I can tell you that. And I have like 5 of them in my head that I could probably, once I get this rhythm that I was talking about earlier established, probably every month I could find 4 or 5 days a month where I can like really dedicate the time to maybe, produce a drawing sufficient enough to get a prototype going. And if I do that frequently enough, prototypes are rolling in. I'm getting feedback from people. I'm making changes. Like I need a rhythm in that design process too. So yes, more designs, more models are coming. Variations. That's what's cool about traditional knives. I
want a muskrat. I want a modern muskrat. That's like, I love the old school muskrats with the yellow, like I forget what the one he had was, but it had that hornet like the yellow jacket muskrat that he had, which the yellow scales, the yellow bone scales. I want one of those, but that knife got lost. Like my dad lost that knife, so I can't ever have it.
Look, find a picture of one you like and send it to me. You know, if you can find an example of what you're talking about, send it to me. I'll take a look at it.
Yeah.
But like variations, like two blade knives. Okay, now I'm hesitant about 2-blade knives from the business risk standpoint. A lot of people really like them, but I feel like it's a relatively small percentage that buys them compared to single blade knives. However, the ones that always do well are the ones that have as the second blade a freaking bottle opener, a cap lifter with like a flathead screwdriver incorporated into the bottle opener.
I was going to ask you about a doctor's knife. That is a really good one, because sometimes you'll have a doctor's knife that has the spatula, or sometimes you'll have the doctor's knife that has the long flat blade that can be used as the pill separator and spatula, and a small, short scalpel sized shaped blade. Because there's two different patterns. There's two different types of those doctor's knives.
Yeah. Well, I got a lot of ideas. I'm always open new ideas, or what you guys have that, you know, what your guys' ideas. I'm working on an American-made slip joint project, not really revealing too many details about that, but just know I'm working on it. It's going to have a very different design language. So it'll be like recognizably a Jack Wolf, but markedly different in its style and execution from the Chinese knives. That's really like the top of, I've got two real priorities right now. Continue the designs of the Chinese knives and implement the American-made knife, and then grow that line. And they're both slip joint lines. And then the third priority would be a locking knife at some point, some form of locking knife. The easy answer would be like a back lock, like a traditional back lock. But I'd like to do something like a bolster lock or a liner lock or a frame lock. But
like the old bucks, the little buck liners,
like a 110.
The brass. Yeah, well, not the 110. I had a little buck. It wasn't a stock. It was like a Stockman. So it was a multi-blade, but the one large clip point blade actually had a little brass liner lock with a little tab on the inside. So one of the blades didn't lock, and the other one had a little brass lock that when it would open up, it would lock in place it was a liner lock. I remember having that. Did he freeze up for everyone or just me? I can't tell if it's my internet or everybody else's.
Write in the comments if you could see me.
I can't ever tell. Like, yeah, you're back, but it's on my end. It's very, very choppy. Oh, so there you go. Everybody's saying he's gone.
Hold on.
Oh, you're back. You're back. You're back.
Yeah,
you're back. So, well, hey Ben, I don't want to use up too much more of your time. If you want to come back in the future, I would love to have, like, when you release the next design, maybe we can do this here in a couple months or so.
Yeah, well, so we just did a drop today. Next drop will be in about 30 days. I find tremendous value in doing these. I always like talking to you guys. As long as I can fit it into my schedule, and I always make an effort to do that, man, I'll come on anytime. I like talking to you guys.
Well, like I said, I do.
It's not like work for me. I get to talk knives. It's awesome.
Well, yeah, and that's why I do it every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Like, I do a live feed every Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 7:30. So I wanted to do a podcast version of this, but if you just want to come on, like, just let me know, and we can always come. Like, when you get ready to release the next one, we come on and we can talk about it. We just come on and bullshit like I do with Jared and Cole over at Neves Knives.
Yeah, man, I'm always here. Guys, if you're interested in the sharpshooter Jack, I would love if you'd buy one, but no pressure from me. I don't know when they're going to sell out. They're about 75% gone. Smoky Mountain had some last time I checked. OCD for EDC, Blade Capone, Arizona Custom Knives. I think that's it off the top of my head anyway. There's an authorized dealer list on my website, so you can hop around and check them out.
Yeah, I took that down. I was trying to save bandwidth because I didn't know which one of us was lagging. But yeah, it's like when you log in, that's one of the first things, like on the left right there at the top. It's authorized dealers.
It's also in the footer. Also in the footer is easy to find. Follow me on Instagram if you use it. Jack Wolf Knives. I'm easy to reach.
Uh-oh. It happened again.
Crap.
Well, hey Ben, I'll
There
tell
I
you
am.
what. Since we're having problems, I'll tell you what. We'll end this. Stick around. I'll see if we've got enough bandwidth to I want to talk to you for a second at the end. I'm going to go ahead and call this just because I'm not sure if it's my internet or his, and it's going to wind up on the podcast that way. So reminder, if you're listening to this on Apple iTunes or Apple Podcasts, there is a link to the video, the full video in the description of it. So, guys, Ben and I are going to say goodbye. We're going to talk for a minute, and then I will do an after show because, well, I still have whiskey left. So why not?
Peace, everyone.
Take it easy, guys. Like I said, I'll try to get this up. I still haven't done the one with swags. I have not put that one up. But if you want to listen to this podcast while you're driving, because it was 2 hours and 14 minutes, yeah, by all means, I will try to get up on Apple Podcasts this weekend. It's too much work, not enough week. So. Guys, take it easy. I'll see you in the after show here in a few minutes.